Chapter 31:17. I covered my mouth and sighed in admiration. I circled the piano several times in amazement. This piano fulfilled all my romantic fantasies about music as a young girl. When Dongyu was practicing the zither from a young age, I liked to sit by his side and watch him play the boring music over and over again in a daze. However, I didn't find it boring to practice with him. I liked his hands on the piano keys the most. His fingers were long and slender, and his fingertips were like porcelain. Against the black and white keys, they were extremely beautiful. Every afternoon, the sunlight outside the window would shine in and reflect on his handsome side profile. Against the light, it was quiet and beautiful. I wasn't born with a love for the piano. My obsession with the piano stemmed more from my infatuation with him. He looked at me circling the piano with his hands in his trouser pockets helplessly. I looked up at him and saw a warm and doting smile on his lips. "Brother, how much does this piano cost?" It was probably because I was touching the piano's frame devoutly like a believer praying. The longing expression on my face was too amusing. He chuckled and then frowned seriously. "It's very expensive." I was getting more and more curious. "How expensive is it?" Dongyu thought for a moment and said, "About 200,000 yuan. I was completely stunned. 200,000 yuan? It was an astronomical figure. He saw my eyes widen like copper bells and my expression of disbelief. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "This piano is a Yamaha. It's specially made for performance. The sound must be great. When is the school anniversary performance scheduled?" "In a week." Dongyu frowned. "Time is tight. Are you familiar with the tune?" "I've learned it, but there are some parts where I still need to consolidate the fingering. I was just an amateur at playing the piano. I hadn't practiced since I was a child. When I was young, when Dongyu played the piano, I would sit next to him and practice with him. I liked it the most when he taught me step by step. His gentle eyes made me indulge in it." "Where is the problem with the fingering?" Dongyu sat on the piano stool and patted it. "Come here and sit next to me." "Okay." I walked over and sat down. He said, "Play it for me first." "All right." I lowered my head and played seriously. From time to time, he would ask me to stop. He would lower his head and adjust my hand to the correct technique. But unknowingly, my mind was no longer on the piano. Instead, I kept staring at the side of his face, lost in thought. I couldn't help but recall that I had once asked Han Xiao how it felt to like someone. She replied that her heart was beating like thunder when she met him, and her heart was filled with joy. When he touched her, his breathing became hot and he fidgeted. That was liking her. I know, I like him out of control. Especially when looking at him so calmly, it was as if 10,000 years had passed and time had stopped. He looked up. Halfway through his sentence, he saw me staring at the side of his face. He was stunned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I retracted my gaze in embarrassment, feeling a little guilty. Dongyu smiled. "Okay, let's continue then." Chapter 31:18. He used so much force that even his expression froze. He could clearly feel my trembling fingertips and was shocked beyond words. His palms were also covered in cold sweat and his knuckles were white. I hesitated again and again. Suddenly, I stared straight at him and mustered up my courage to plead, "Brother, let's always be together, okay?" Dongyu was stunned and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. His eyes met mine briefly and he quickly looked away. He lowered his head and did not say a word. When I saw his silence, it was as if a thorn had pierced my heart. I felt a little suffocated. "Brother, I hate it when you're with other girls. I've imagined you dating other girls, hugging, dating, kissing. I can't accept it. It's like the end of the world. Let's be together forever and neither of us will leave. Just like we promised when we were young, let's be together, okay? 100 years, a lifetime together." My tone was humble and pleading. I was flustered and helpless. I was hoping that he would gently pull me into his arms like he did when we were young and promise me, okay, we'll be together forever." But he didn't. He only reached out his other hand with a trembling hand and pried my fingers apart one by one. When he looked up at me, his face was pale and helpless. Be good, stop fooling around, okay? I'm not fooling around. I'm obviously very serious. Can't you tell? Can't you tell? I approached him seriously and said anxiously, I want to be with you forever, brother. Didn't we agree? Xiaochuan were siblings. One day, I'll have a girl I love. She'll become my wife and spend the rest of my life with me. The one who'll be with me forever is that girl, not you. Do you understand? I don't understand. My face instantly burned as I questioned him, why? Why can't I? When I heard these words coming out of his mouth, it was extremely cruel. My heart ached like a piercing needle and I couldn't see clearly. I clenched my fists tightly. Despair seemed to drown me. I asked, then what did you promise me in the past? Was it a lie? We made a promise. He turned his face away with a complicated expression, lowered his head, and stared straight at the black and white piano keys. He pretended to be calm and said, I promised you that I would be with you for the rest of my life and never leave you, but not in this way. Do you understand? The air suddenly became deathly silent. I saw him frowning. His face was dark and gloomy as if he was trying to avoid me. While I was unconscious, I couldn't help but reach out and clasp his wrist tightly. He turned his head in surprise, but I couldn't control myself and moved closer to him. I held his shoulder and kissed him clumsily. When she was young, she loved to watch those romantic and sweet idol dramas. Every time it was the kissing segment, she would watch the scene of the male and female lead kissing on the TV screen and her heart would beat faster. I followed what I saw on TV and held his face. I gently closed my eyes and traced his thin lips with my lips. Chapter 31:19. There was an inexplicable fragrance on his body. It wasn't the smell of perfume, but the light fragrance of laundry detergent. The moment my lips touched his, my mind went blank. All I knew was that I hugged his shoulders fiercely and deepened the kiss, longing for the warmth of his lips. I had thought that he would struggle and resist, and then push me away forcefully to break this out-of-control situation. But he didn't. I saw him open his eyes in a daze. Many complicated emotions flashed across his face. Then he closed his eyes subconsciously, his shoulders trembling. I was even more nervous. My eyelashes fluttered, and the corners of my eyes felt sour, as if tears were falling. Perhaps he could sense my despair, but he couldn't help but reach out and try to hug me. I yearned for him. What about him? Did he yearn for me as well? But in the next second, he was stunned and pushed me away forcefully. Caught off guard, my body tilted and I fell onto the piano. His elbow pressed hard against the black and white keys, producing an extremely discordant chord. It was ear-piercing and heavy. I looked up and saw him suddenly turn around. Under the moonlight, his face was a little pale, and he felt ridiculous and shocked. I had never seen him like this before. I stood up awkwardly and helplessly. The corners of my lips twitched, and I said with trembling lips, Brother, why did you push me away? He wiped his lips with a blank gaze. There was still the residual warmth of my first kiss there. Dongyu turned around abruptly and questioned me, Ridiculous. Xiaochuan, do you know what you're doing? How is it ridiculous? How is it ridiculous? My throat tightened. I got up from the piano stool and walked behind him. I reached out and carefully tugged at the corner of his shirt, as if I had done something wrong when we were young and guiltily begged for his forgiveness. Brother, can I kiss you? You can't. Dongyu shook off my hand uncontrollably and walked to the window. He said in a low voice, I can't either. Why not? I couldn't help but cry. I said aggrievedly, I like you and you like me. Isn't that enough? I shouted the last sentence with all my might, almost breaking my voice. He suddenly turned around and walked up to me. He held my shoulders tightly. His eyes were bloodshot as he said crazily, You are my sister and I am your brother. Don't you understand? It's impossible. Do you really not understand? Why? I didn't understand and continued to ask, I can't do without you. The same blood flows in our bodies. We're brother and sister. If we really get together, it'll be like *****. Do you understand? He stared at me as if trying to wake me up. I suddenly laughed, feeling sad. I extended my hand and held his wrist. I placed my hand over his wrist and questioned him, "Is this the reason?" I stared at him with teary eyes and said humbly, "If that's the reason, then I'll cut it open with a knife and let all the blood in my body flow out. Will that do?" "Shut up." Dongyu turned pale with fright and covered my lips tightly. "You're threatening me, aren't you?" I saw the unconcealed heartache on his face and broke down completely. I threw myself into his arms and cried helplessly. How would I dare to threaten him? Chapter 31:20. "But I don't want you to be with another girl. My heart will ache, my heart will ache. Brother, I just like you. There's nothing I can do about it. Wouldn't it be great if I could control it? But there's no way to control liking you." His body stiffened as if he had suddenly run out of energy. His arms fell weakly to his sides. He looked up, wanting to hug me, but he didn't dare to touch me. When I saw his helpless expression, my heart ached. Tears slid into the corners of my lips, bitter and astringent. "When I was young, I was so glad that you were my brother. I had the best brother in the world. But now, I don't want you to be my brother at all. Don't cry, okay?" Dongyu held my face and gently wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. Even he didn't notice the heartache in his eyes. When he saw that I was crying, his eyes turned red as well. He had never been good at expressing emotions. Regardless of whether he was happy or sad, he always had a calm and composed expression. He wanted to hug me, but he didn't dare to reach out to touch me. He wanted to hold my hand, but he couldn't muster the courage. He once said that no matter what we faced, we had to have courage and press forward. But when I hugged him like a moth to a flame and said that I liked him, he couldn't muster up the courage to hug me back. Perhaps he understood, better than I did, that some courage was ultimately futile. If you wanted the moon in the sky, you wouldn't necessarily be able to pluck it with courage. Hence, some things were destined to be unattainable. Some love was destined to have no ending. That night, when I returned home, I sat on the back seat of the bicycle. However, instead of wrapping my arms around his waist like before, I gently tugged at the corner of his shirt. The evening breeze was getting stronger, making it difficult for me to open my eyes. I repeatedly thought about what Dongyu had said to me, but I didn't want to take a single word of it to heart. In those few days, Dongyu seemed to have become a little indifferent to me. He had never been so cold to me since I was young. Even when he came to pick me up after school, he was no longer as close to me as he used to be. He also stopped practicing the zither with me. Towards the end, there was a complicated chapter in the middle of Jiangnen that I couldn't master. I had no choice but to ask the teacher to change the song list. I changed it to a song that I was more confident in, Autumn Whisper. I was in a bad mood and didn't know what I had done wrong. Unknowingly, in my apprehension, the school's anniversary soon arrived. The night before, I was so nervous that I tossed and turned in bed. I couldn't sleep. I was looking forward to the school's anniversary celebration, but I was also nervous. The school anniversary was on the weekend. On this day, Second High School was open to the public. Even students from other schools could enter and visit the school. Su Chi said that he would get a bunch of brothers to support me. I was amused when I heard that and asked if Dongyu was coming. He said that Dongyu was not coming because he had something to do. When I heard that, my mood turned gloomy again. So many days had passed, yet he was still avoiding me. Could it be that he was prepared to avoid me for the rest of his life? I was a little afraid that the distance between me and Dongyu would gradually drift apart. But I really didn't know that in this world, he was the only person closest to me in my life. I can lose the world, but I can't lose him. Even if it was the same as before, it would be fine. Chapter 31:21. The students participating in the talent show had to go to the auditorium in advance to get used to the scene. The teachers would pay close attention to how to go on stage, how to introduce themselves, and even how to smile in front of the camera. Only then did I realize that there would be a video recording of the entire event. This made me even more nervous. At 4 in the afternoon, I stood in the magnificent auditorium and saw that the students had slowly entered. The art teacher had put on some light makeup for me. To go on stage, I wore the prettiest dress in my closet. As the opening song, I was in charge of taking the lead. Just as the performance was about to begin, I heard someone calling my name. When I turned around, I saw Su Qi waving at me from the first row. I immediately saw the person standing beside him, looking at me silently. When Dongyu saw me, he suddenly stood up and stared at me nervously with anticipation in his eyes. Our eyes met briefly. Before I could say anything, the art teacher hurriedly pulled me over and said, "Xiachuan, they're announcing. It'll be your turn soon." I nodded and hurried to the back of the stage. It wasn't until the host called my name that I finally reacted. The teacher was hurrying me and using the last few seconds to remind me. The most he said was nothing more than to tell me not to be nervous and to relax. When I walked onto the stage, it was pitch black below. Clap, clap. The stage lights fell at my feet. At that moment, I was surrounded by a blazing white light. The whole world was barren. I tensed up and hugged the microphone helplessly. I looked around but couldn't see anything. Finally, at the front of the stage, I saw him. His figure was against the light and I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it had to be him. "Hello, everyone. I'm Yin Xiachuan from Year 2 Class 1. I'm very honored to be on this stage." I guessed that the art teacher, who was standing behind the scenes and staring at the stage, must be pounding his chest and stamping his feet in anger. Then he desperately lowered his voice and said, "Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous." But I couldn't hear or see anything. My heart was so nervous that it felt like it was about to jump out of my throat. I pressed my chest, and finally, after calming down a little, I slowly said, "Hello everyone, I am Yin Xiachuan from the first class of the second year. I am very honored to be able to step on this beautiful stage. Next, I will be singing a piano piece, Autumn Whisper." The audience applauded. I turned around and gently covered my rapidly beating chest. I slowly walked to the tripod piano. When I sat down, my fingers accidentally touched the piano keys. Along with the microphone, the wrong syllable played a discordant melody. I frowned and suddenly took a deep breath. Once again, I gently stroked the piano keys. I imagined Dongyu sitting beside me. It was as if my nervous soul had finally been released. My 10 fingers formed a circle, and then the syllables flowed from my fingertips like flowing water. Smooth, soothing, tactful. Relatively speaking, the technique of this song was more difficult than that of Jiangnan. However, the advantage was that I had practiced this song for an entire year. After a little consolidation, I was so proficient that it was as if I had become one with the zither. Chapter 31:22. I immediately stood up. Below the stage, Dongyu suddenly walked onto the stage. Amidst the applause and cheers, he pulled me tightly into his arms. At that time, I felt that even with so many people in the auditorium and the surging applause, it couldn't compare to the warmth of his hug. After the performance, I was about to pack my things and go back with Dongyu. Dongyu and Su Qi were waiting for me at the school gate. I thought that perhaps this celebration would be the best time for me to reconcile with Dongyu. Just as I reached the door, I saw Su Qi waving at me. I walked over with a smile, only to see a few of my classmates walking towards me. When they saw me, they called out to me excitedly, "Xiachuan, was that your boyfriend who hugged you on stage just now?" I was stunned. I followed their gazes and looked at Dongyu, only to hear them whispering excitedly, "So handsome! Xiachuan, what's your boyfriend's name?" Su Qi heard their discussion and immediately walked over. He said unhappily, "You guys seem to have misunderstood something, right? His name is Yin Dongyu. He's not Yin Xiachuan's boyfriend. They're siblings, can't you tell?" But I thought he was Yin Xiachuan's boyfriend. So they're siblings. Xiachuan, don't mind it." When Dongyu heard this, he turned his face away expressionlessly. I didn't feel good when I heard this. I didn't know what Dongyu was thinking. However, on the way home, Su Qi was chatting and laughing, but he walked to the side without saying a word. Even when we got home, he didn't interact much with me. Instead, he returned to his room and locked the door. I stood outside his room in a daze for a long time before returning to my room in a daze. I originally hoped that as time passed, the tense relationship between us would be eased. However, time didn't bring about much change in our tense relationship. Instead, it brought about an unfamiliar girl. The first time I met that girl was on Dongyu's 16th birthday. That winter break, the weather was especially cold, so cold that it could freeze a person's heartbeat. At that time, people would usually book a table for their birthdays and invite a few good friends and classmates. After the meal, they would go to karaoke. Most of the time, their parents would be there on that day. They were more indulgent, so they could always go home very late. Dongyu's birthdays had always been celebrated at home because he didn't like too many people and lively environments. Dongyu said that he wanted to eat hot pot at home for his birthday. Early in the morning, I excitedly got out of bed and found the piggy bank on the desk. I smashed it and picked up the change one by one. There were even 2 10-kwai notes. I thought to myself that the pocket money I saved up for a year was finally going to be put to good use. When I was young, I always forgot to give Dongyu a present for his birthday. In my eyes, birthdays were meaningful as long as the family was together. However, after entering junior high school, the concept of birthday gifts gradually became clearer. After lunch, I took a bag of change and ran to the cake shop. I ordered a 10-inch birthday cake and repeatedly reminded them to write "Happy Birthday to Dongyu" on it. I wasn't in a hurry to leave the shop. I waited for the whole afternoon until the cake was ready. I counted the candles and took the cake home. Chapter 31:23. I had never seen this girl before. She was thin and tall, with a delicate face and a sweet smile. She was wearing a pure white dress. "Dongyu!" I ran over and hid the cake behind me. I walked up to him and asked curiously, "Who is she?" Dongyu glanced at me, his expression inexplicably uneasy. The girl glanced at me and introduced herself graciously. "You're Dongyu's sister, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Hello." She smiled and extended her hand to me. "I'm Dongyu's girlfriend. I'm in the same grade as him." "Girlfriend?" I sized her up in shock. It was obvious that I didn't believe her one-sided story. I didn't respond immediately to her outstretched hand. Instead, I stared at her in a daze, at a loss. "Linli, this is my sister. Her name is Xiachuan." Dongyu introduced her and then said to me, "Xiachuan, this is my girlfriend. Her name is Linli." "Your girlfriend?" I couldn't believe it, so much so that I looked a little embarrassed. Dongyu's expression turned uneasy when he saw my sorry state. Linli didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, she smiled and said, "Am I not liked by her?" Dongyu smiled. "How can that be? She's just a little shy." Shy? That's right. I was indeed shy. Especially when it came to this girlfriend of mine, I was caught off guard. Perhaps sensing that the atmosphere was too tense, Dongyu hurriedly said to her, "Let's go upstairs first." Then, he said to me, "Hurry up and go upstairs too. We have to prepare the hot pot. Mom and Dad won't be home tonight. You have to keep this a secret." He raised a finger to his lips and winked at me. I watched in a daze as he went upstairs and stood there motionless. I didn't know why I was so stubborn at that time, standing there foolishly for so long. Perhaps I was thinking that if Dongyu hadn't seen me go upstairs, would he have come down to look for me? He was so meticulous. Would he have been able to tell that I was unhappy? Would he have coaxed me gently like before and then told me that he was lying to me? I stood there foolishly and didn't go upstairs until Suchi arrived. He parked the car and found me standing there motionless. He walked over and patted me on the shoulder. "Why didn't you go upstairs?" At his reminder, I snapped back to reality. I looked up at the sky. Before I knew it, it was already dusk. I stood there foolishly for 2 hours. Seeing that I was still in a daze, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the cake in my hand, he quickly took it from my hand. Only then did I realize that my fingers were bleeding from the ribbon of the cake. "Let's go upstairs." As Suchi spoke, he reached for my hand. I quickly asked him, "Suchi, does Dongyu have a girlfriend?" Suchi did not look surprised. Instead, he asked matter-of-factly, "Don't you know?" I shook my head and asked him, "How long have you been talking?" "It's been about a month." "Oh," I replied. Only then did I realize why he had been coming home so late after school recently. I couldn't accept such a thing. Chapter 31:24. Su Chi took my hand and led me upstairs. When we entered the house, Dong Yu was in the kitchen, preparing the ingredients for the hot pot. Originally, I should have been very happy on my birthday. I was famous for my love of hot pot, especially the chicken soup base that Dong Yu had concocted. It was delicious. However, standing in the kitchen, I saw that other than Dong Yu, the girl was there as well. She stood beside Dong Yu and helped him prepare the soup while she was in charge of the ingredients for the hot pot. The two of them were chatting and laughing in a harmonious manner. The kitchen was too small. With the two of us standing there was no room for a third person. However, the spot beside Dong Yu that used to belong to me was now occupied by another girl. I felt a little suffocated. I placed the cake on the table with a numb expression. Just as I opened it, Lin Li walked out of the kitchen. When she saw me at the table, she quickly walked over and placed the cake on the sideboard. It's not time to eat the cake yet. The hot pot is almost ready. With that, she busied herself with her work. I looked at her, not knowing what to think. My mind was blank, and many images flashed through my mind. Dong Yu had said that sooner or later he would fall in love with a girl, get to know her, fall in love with her, and spend the rest of his life with her. That person couldn't possibly be me. Then, could she be that girl? So, this was nothing. Ever since the last argument with him in the music room, our relationship had suddenly become a little stiff. He seemed to be deliberately avoiding me. No matter what I said to him, his attitude became much more indifferent than before. He was neither cold nor warm. He must be angry. I wanted to make him happy and try to break the tension between us. I originally thought that this birthday would definitely be able to ease the cold relationship between us a little. But I didn't expect such an accident to happen. Dong Yu brought out the hot pot. After the four of us sat down, Su Chi looked around and asked curiously, "Is it just the four of us?" Dong Yu nodded. "I don't like too many people. I know you. You don't like noisy environments. It's good that the four of us are here. It's not bad to have a quiet birthday." Su Chi clapped his hands. "Then let's dig in." Lin Li stood up and poured drinks for us. I sat in my seat with a numb expression. I didn't know what to think as I watched Lin Li put the ingredients into the pot and take them out one after another. She was a girl who knew how to take care of people. She took the initiative to pick up the ingredients for Dong Yu. Seeing that I didn't move my chopsticks, she picked up a piece of beef for me and asked with a smile, "Why aren't you eating?" "Oh." I quickly picked up my chopsticks and looked at the hot pot. The steam blew into my eyes, and I couldn't see clearly. "It's so hot." I rubbed my eyes, blinked, and forced a smile. Dong Yu suddenly looked up at me. However, he quickly turned around and smiled at Lin Li. I didn't know what he was saying. I found that my ears were suddenly not working properly. I could not hear what he was saying. The hot pot was quickly scooped clean. Su Chi clutched her stomach and slumped into a chair, crying out, "I'm full." I quickly said, "I haven't eaten the cake yet." Lin Li also said, "I'm full too. What to do? I can't eat any more." Su Chi said, "At least blow out the candles and make a wish." Chapter 31:25. There's no need to blow out the candles. In any case, a wish won't come true. Lin Li's expression froze. But people always ask for candles to make wishes on their birthdays. Dong Yu said, "My family's tradition is to eat longevity noodles." I see. I suddenly stood up and brought the cake to the table. Then I arranged the 16 candles in order. I didn't know what I was obsessed with. I lit the candles one by one with a lighter and said to Dong Yu, "Dong Yu, make a wish? Although your wish might not come true, perhaps it will come true one day?" Dong Yu looked up and finally looked me in the eye. After a moment of silence, he smiled and said, "My wish will never come true." My smile froze. Su Chi couldn't help but be curious. "What kind of wish is it that even you say will never come true?" "Let me guess." Lin Li thought for a moment. "Get into a good university?" Su Chi said, "With Dong Yu's grades, it won't be difficult for him to get into a top-notch university. Is there a need to make a wish?" Lin Li guessed again. "Find a decent job in the future." Su Chi said, "If he goes to a good university, will he still have to worry about a job?" Lin Li, don't make wild guesses. Dong Yu is always unfathomable. Who knows what he's thinking all day long? I suddenly walked to the switch and turned off the lights. In the dining room, there was only the flickering light of the candles. Against Dongyu's face, his deep-set features looked inexplicably downcast. Suchi also said, "Hurry up and make a wish. Whether it comes true or not, you have to have a wish. Close your eyes. You must be sincere." Only then did Dongyu close his eyes. 5 seconds later, he blew out the candles with a whoosh. Suchi walked over and turned on the lights. He looked down and saw me standing there in a daze. He was stunned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I regained my spirits and quickly said, "Let's cut the cake." Dongyu suddenly stood up. "I'm not eating anymore. Lin Li and I are going to the Lantern Festival in the park. Are you guys coming?" I realized that the Lantern Festival was approaching. There would be a Lantern Festival in the park. It would be beautiful. I'd always wanted to go with Dongyu. The night view would be beautiful. But my gaze fell on Lin Li with a complicated expression. Suchi did not think much of it. Lantern Festival? What's so interesting about the Lantern Festival? Today is your birthday, let's go sing. I also said, "Yeah, I want to sing." Lin Li said, "I want to go to the Lantern Festival." This opportunity was hard to come by. Normally, there wouldn't be such an opportunity. It was only available during the Lantern Festival. "Suchi, Xiachen, let's go." I said, "I don't want to go to the Lantern Fair. I don't want to see them walking hand in hand at the Lantern Fair." Usually, when I was this stubborn, Dongyu would be the first to compromise and take care of my emotions. However, that night he did not do so. Instead, he said, "Suchi, accompany her to sing. Lin Li and I are going to the Lantern Festival. We have an appointment." He then said to Lin Li, "Let's wash the dishes before we go." Lin Li nodded, and the two of them carried the bowls and chopsticks into the kitchen, chatting and laughing as they began to wash the dishes. I suddenly realized that Dongyu's rare smile was no longer mine. When he looked at me, he no longer had that doting smile. Chapter 31:26. I sat in the dining room and silently watched the two of them wash the dishes in the kitchen. I suddenly remembered that when I was young, I was punished by my mother to do chores. In the kitchen, I would stand on a stool and wash the dishes alone. Dongyu would run over and join me. Originally, I hated washing dishes. It was so dry and boring. But because of him, I enjoyed the time of washing dishes. Once, when we were fooling around, he accidentally made foam all over my face, and I accidentally ate more than half of it. The soap frothed in the water, and when it entered my mouth, it was bitter and astringent. Because of this bitterness, my face wrinkled. Dongyu went downstairs and used his remaining pocket money to buy a bottle of Coke. He urged me to drink it. I was forced to drink the whole can of Coke. At the last moment, he asked nervously, "How is it? Is it still bitter?" I stared at him for a long time before I suddenly opened my mouth and let out a loud burp. He was scared out of his wits, but when he saw me giggle foolishly, he leaned forward and sniffed in all seriousness. It smells like detergent." I was so angry that I chased after him. "It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, would I have eaten the foam?" He avoided me and teased me, "Who asked you to be so stupid? Little fool. Little fool. Don't call me little fool again. Little fool." The images gradually overlapped. I snapped out of my thoughts and saw that Dongyu and Lin Li had already set the table. They walked out, picked up their coats, and were about to leave. I asked cautiously behind him, "Are you really not going to eat the cake?" Dongyu didn't turn around. He only said lightly, "I told you I don't like cake." With that, he took Lin Li's hand and left. The door closed with a bang, leaving Suchi and me standing there. My eyes reddened with grievance. I walked up to the table and looked at the cake. On it was written, "Happy birthday to Dongyu." Now that I thought about it, it was somewhat ironic. "This cake is very expensive," I burst into tears. "I saved up a year's worth of pocket money to buy this cake. Why did he say that he doesn't like cake? Is it because the cake is not good?" When Suchi saw that I was crying, he immediately panicked. He walked over and quickly comforted me. "Why are you crying? Just ignore him. He doesn't like it, but I do." Then he pulled me to sit down and divided the cake. Then he picked up a fork and started eating. Delicious. As he spoke, he looked at me. My hand that was holding the cake didn't move at all. My tears were dripping onto the cake. He didn't know what to do, so he came over and hugged my shoulders. Do you know that I'm most afraid of you crying? Whenever you cry, I'm always at a loss. Tell me, what should I do with you? He squatted in front of me and coaxed me. What do I have to do to stop you from crying? Su-Chi. My mouth trembled and my voice was as light as a feather. Take me to sing. Su-Chi was stunned, but nodded without hesitation. At that time, karaoke was a very trendy thing to do. For those of us who were studying at the time, karaoke rooms were very expensive. Just a private room alone cost more than 200 yuan. Some of the better ones cost more than 500 yuan. Chapter 31:27. It was also because of Su-Chi that I stepped into a karaoke room for the first time in my life. On Dongyu's birthday night, it was the second time. Compared to the nervousness of the first time, sitting in the karaoke room with Su-Chi, I actually felt like an old man. I ordered a lot of songs, most of which were popular at the time. At that time, Jay Cho and Lin Junjia's songs were popular. I ordered I Still Miss Her and held the microphone as I sang. Tears drown me who should be sad who let go of this relationship. I finally understand promises that can't be kept become shackles. Happiness is always in short supply in reality. Please tell her I don't love her. Smiling sadly I punish myself. Want to stop all this struggle. Harden my heart. Tell a heartfelt lie. Don't tell her I still miss her. Hate is easier to let go than love. When tears clog my chest, just let silence replace all the answers. This song existed in Dongyu's MP3 player for a long time. At that time, I didn't understand why he liked this song. When I first heard it, the melody was nice and the lyrics were sad and beautiful. I was addicted to it and collected many of Lin Junjia's songs. I also became Lin Junjia's fan. However, after listening to so many songs, this was the only one I liked. I never got tired of listening to it. I don't love, I don't hurt, I don't understand. My heart has long been hollowed out, but my words are insincere. Please tell her I don't love her. Smiling sadly I punish myself. Want to stop all this struggle. Harden my heart. Tell a heartfelt lie. Tell her I still miss her. It is easier to let go than love. When tears clog my chest, just let silence replace all the answers. After singing this song, I suddenly felt that every word in the lyrics was almost heart-wrenching. I felt a sharp pain in my heart. I picked up a can of beer, pulled the tab, and took a big gulp. Su-Chi looked at me silently. Perhaps he could tell that something was wrong with my mood today, but he couldn't understand my sadness. For a moment, he just sat silently beside me and put his arm around my shoulder. Ignore them. I said to him, let's sing our song. Su-Chi said, Xiachun, what's wrong? You drank so much, are you okay? What's this bit of wine? As I spoke, I took another sip. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He pressed his hand against mine to stop me. Stop drinking. Are you here to sing or to drink? You ordered so many drinks. Isn't it a waste if you don't drink them? You don't have to finish everything you ordered. I put my arms around his shoulders without any explanation. At that moment, my head started to feel groggy because of the alcohol. I leaned very close to him. Leaning close to his face, I smiled and said, Sing with me, okay? My breath reeked of alcohol. I heard that you sing very well. Sing a song for me. Su-Chi smiled and walked to the music machine. He chose a song. Perhaps he guessed that I liked Lin Junjia's songs, so he chose, I Really Want to Love Her. It's raining. He's holding an umbrella beside you. But I wasn't happy, because the smile on his face was very forced. I really want to love her. But the eyes lie. It's easier to keep it a secret, lest our feelings become complicated. I really want to love her. But reason quarrels. Is it possible to quit? Who can give me a good answer? If I can't bear to, if this goes on, we're all victims. I really want to love her. But the eyes lie. It's easier to hide, lest our feelings become responsible. I really want to love her. But reason quarrels. Is it possible to quit? Chapter 31:28. When love is on the verge of danger, we'll both be scarred, we'll both suffer unspeakably. I really want to love her, but the eyes are lined. It's easier to hide so as not to complicate my feelings. I really want to love her, but reason is arguing. Is it possible to withdraw? Who can give me a good answer? Oh, love teaches us that we can't let go. Love teaches us that we can't let go. I drank my beer in silence, but the beer that had gone into my mouth seemed to have gone into my eyes. My vision gradually became blurry and hazy, and I almost couldn't see clearly. I quickly rubbed my eyes and gulped down one can after another. Chi was a little angry. He snatched the beer from my hand and said to me in an angry tone that he had never used before, "You can't drink anymore." I said, "I want to drink more." I was sad. My heart felt like it was being blocked by something. I couldn't swallow or spit it out. I wondered if I would feel better if I got drunk. Even if it was just for one night, it would save me one night of suffering. I finally understood why some people liked to drink when they were sad. It wasn't because they were pretentious, but because it could cover up some pain and numb it appropriately. Although the pain would probably become clear again tomorrow, at least it would be better to have a few seconds less of suffering. Perhaps I had drunk too much, but I felt my stomach churn. I rushed to the bathroom, held the basin and retched, but nothing came out. Chi walked over with the green tea. He unscrewed the lid and handed it to me. He said helplessly, "Don't drink anymore. If you drink anymore, you'll really get drunk. It's not good at all when you're drunk." I took the green tea and drank half the bottle. My body swayed slightly, but my mind slowly cleared. I looked up at him. Perhaps he saw the bloodshot eyes and red and swollen eyelids, and was shocked. "Xiaochuan, something's wrong with you today." I suddenly hugged him tightly. A crazy thought flashed through my mind. Because I had taken the initiative to hug him, Chi's body stiffened. He stared at me blankly, probably unable to tell if this hug was due to the alcohol or if it was because he had lost control of his emotions. However, the next second I did something even crazier. I held his face in my hands and kissed his lips softly. Leaving his lips, I looked at him seriously. Seeing that he was still in shock, I smiled with tears in my eyes and asked calmly, "Chi, don't you like me?" Chi nodded. "I've liked you for so long. Do you still have doubts? Then let's go out, what do you think?" As soon as I finished speaking, Chi was stunned for about 5 seconds before a surprised smile appeared on his face. "You finally agreed to go out with me." He looked at me seriously. "Xiaochuan, are you joking? Or was it because he was drunk that he spoke nonsense? Will you regret it tomorrow?" "No, I promise to date you." Chi smiled brightly and hugged me tightly. Then he whispered into my ear, "Little fool, do you like me too?" I said calmly, "No, I don't like you." Chi was stunned when he heard this. He looked at me again with a puzzled expression on his handsome face. Chapter 31:29. I'm a slow person, and it's hard for me to like someone. But since you've been chasing me for so long, I've decided to try dating you. Although I was smiling, I was begging in my heart. "Chi, please, let me fall in love with you. Let me fall in love with you without hesitation. Let me fall in love with you regardless of my own safety. Let me like you, just like how I liked Dongyu. I want to like you too." Chi was silent for a few seconds. I wondered if he was starting to feel troubled, so I said, "Will it be too much? If it's too much, then forget it." With that, I turned around to leave. Chi hugged me nervously from behind and quickly said, "No." "What?" He turned me around and caressed my face, smiling brightly. "Even if there's only a little hope, I won't give up. Xiaochuan, be my girlfriend." Crying and laughing, I promised him. I was also serious, really serious about cooperating with him. He couldn't sense my other emotions. He seemed inexplicably excited and immersed in joy. He held my face and asked with a smile, "Then can I kiss my girlfriend now?" Unlike his domineering attitude when we first met, he was actually asking for my opinion. I looked into his eyes and felt that they were exceptionally beautiful, like black jade agate. At this moment, they were so affectionate that it felt like they were sucking my soul away. I didn't dare to look him in the eye. Blushing, I lowered my head and pursed my lips. I nodded gently and smiled faintly. In the next second, he moved closer to me and kissed me on the lips. He was very careful, as if he was treating a precious treasure. He lifted my chin, leaned down, and kissed me. I responded obediently, like a pious student, kissing him the way he kissed me. But the deeper he kissed me, the more my heart beat like a stagnant pool. There were no ripples, no splashes. It was as if my heart was so quiet that there was no echo. His lips were soft and warm, different from Dongyu's. Dongyu's lips were thin and slightly cold. One was passionate like fire. The other was as indifferent as ice. But the feeling it gave off was different after all. Su-Chi kissed me, but I didn't feel anything special. My heart didn't seem to be beating too fast either. I couldn't help but recall the scene of me and Dongyu kissing. In the music classroom, in the small forest at the bonfire party, we tasted each other's lips. At that time, our heartbeat felt like it was about to burst my eardrums. At that time, my heart was beating as fast as thunder. It was different. I almost couldn't tell which kiss was what a relationship should be like, and which heartbeat was the rhythm of a relationship. I only knew that I was responding to him seriously, but my heart was so desperate that it was about to collapse. What kind of feeling was a kiss supposed to feel? After becoming Su-Chi's girlfriend, her life turned upside down. Overnight, everyone in the school seemed to know about our relationship. Su-Chi couldn't wait to tell the world about it. The next day, the news spread throughout the school. Everyone knew that I had become Su-Chi's girlfriend. Sitting in the classroom and walking on the field, I could feel the probing, envy, jealousy, and scrutiny in their eyes when they landed on me. The name Su-Chi could be said to be an influential figure. Chapter 3130. As a result, my popularity in class was already very poor. As a result, no one dared to approach me. The boys didn't dare to approach me to avoid arousing suspicion. Some of the girls distanced themselves from me. Some probably felt that it was ridiculous and unorthodox to be in a relationship in junior high. Some felt that I had tarnished Su-Chi's name and wasn't worthy of being friends with them. But I didn't care. At that time, I hoped that Su-Chi would be my salvation. I hoped that he could lead me out of a vicious circle. I hoped that he could take me away from the world of despair that Dongyu had brought me. I wanted to love him so much. I wanted to fall uncontrollably in love with this sunny and handsome boy. Then, with him, I could confidently appear in front of Dongyu and say with a smile, "Brother, I'm in love." This was my boyfriend. Everyone in school knew that Su-Chi and I were in a relationship, and Dongyu was no exception. Hence, that night after school, when I walked to the school gate, I didn't see Su-Chi. Instead, I saw Dongyu with a livid expression. He was carrying his school bag and his clothes were disheveled. His originally docile black hair was rebelliously covering his eyes. There were obvious bruises on his face. They weren't obvious, but if you looked closely, you could tell that he had been in a fight. I was a little surprised and walked over. Just as I was about to ask him if he had been in a fight, he suddenly grabbed my wrist and questioned me, "Is it true that you're dating Su-Chi?" "Yes," I replied, pretending to be relaxed. "So you found out. Did he force himself on you?" Dongyu looked very angry, which made me even more flustered. I didn't know why he was so angry. Shouldn't he be happy? He had finally gotten rid of me and didn't have to be pestered by me anymore. Shouldn't he be happy? I smiled calmly and said, "I confessed to him last night. Coincidentally, he's liked me for a long time. It was consensual. No one forced anyone." "Are you crazy?" Dongyu said angrily, "I thought you treated Su-Chi as your brother. You're still in junior high. Do you know what kind of guy Su-Chi is? You can be friends, but dating is another matter." "I know. He's tall, handsome, bright, and popular. Moreover, he's very loyal. Most importantly, he treats me very well. He'll definitely be a very good boyfriend." Dongyu was obviously infuriated by my long speech. He ruffled his hair anxiously and frowned. Suddenly, he glared at me again. "Did you guys kiss?" I nodded. His gaze froze for a moment before he continued, Both of you have other intimate relations?" Halfway through his question, he felt uneasy and didn't ask any further. I felt even more embarrassed. My face was hot because I knew what he wanted to ask. To put it bluntly, he wanted to ask if Dongyu and I had slept together. At that time, I didn't know what kind of purpose I had, but I asked numbly, what if I said yes? Dongyu lost control of himself and asked coldly, is it to take revenge on me? Revenge? Why should I take revenge on you? It took me a few seconds to react. Oh, I said with a chuckle. Do you think I'm mad at you for finding a girlfriend? I smiled and said, don't let your imagination run wild. With that, I turned my head and wanted to leave. I was afraid that if I faced him again, my eyes would sting. Chapter 31:31. He turned around, got his bicycle, and caught up with me. He grabbed the strap of my bag and said, get in. I said a little angrily, I'll walk back by myself. Xiachun, get in. Dongyu seemed very persistent. Don't make me lose my temper. When I heard this, I felt even more upset. Lose his temper? What right did he have to be angry? Did I do something wrong? Why was he allowed to have a girlfriend, while I had to get his consent and approval to date other boys? Why? I felt indignant and kept my head turned away from him. He was about to say something again when I saw Su Qi approaching me on his bicycle. He also saw Dongyu. As if on purpose, he didn't stop until he was beside me. The wheels of the bicycle were pressed against Dongyu's bicycle. It was more like a confrontation. When Dongyu saw him, his expression turned even uglier. Get lost. Su Qi ignored him and said to me, get in. Dongyu said angrily, Su Qi, have you forgotten what I warned you? Before he could finish, I put my bag in Su Qi's basket and got into the back seat. I hugged his waist, ignoring Dongyu's anger, and said to Su Qi, I want a soda. Alright, I'll treat you. As Su Qi spoke, he waited for Dongyu. Under his cold gaze, Su Qi turned the bicycle around and drove me away. I didn't look back. Dongyu didn't chase after us either. He must be disappointed in me, I thought. That night, after coming out of the karaoke room, Su Qi sent me home. Before he left, he grabbed the back of my hand and pulled me to him. He couldn't seem to hide the smile on his face. You're leaving just like that? Aren't you going to say anything? I asked. What do you mean? Su Qi scratched the bridge of my nose. Aren't you going to give me a kiss? My face immediately burned. I turned around shyly, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone standing on my balcony. I couldn't help but look up and catch a glimpse of the figure leaning against the balcony, looking downstairs. The night was too dark, so I couldn't see him clearly, but I could guess his identity. I bit my lip and suddenly turned around to look at Su Qi. Su Qi's initially disappointed face was instantly revived when I turned around. I scolded, idiot. Then she approached him, stood on her tiptoes, put her arms around his shoulders, and gave him a kiss. He's too tall. Compared to his height of 1.8 meters, I'm 1.6 meters. I do seem a little petite and dainty. After Su Qi left, I turned around, but he was no longer on the balcony. After returning home, I passed by Dongyu's room and stopped in my tracks. I suddenly came to my senses. My actions just now were terrible. I don't know what I'm trying to do, who I'm trying to provoke, and what's the point? I walked to the balcony again and stood where Dongyu was standing. From this angle, I could see everything clearly. I just wanted to show that I could do without him. Ever since that incident, Dongyu and I have distanced ourselves from each other. I didn't know if he was deliberately distancing himself from me or if I was deliberately distancing myself from him. I laughed at myself more than once. The tacit understanding between brother and sister was vividly displayed at this moment. Chapter 31:32. I followed behind him slowly, trying my best to hide my tracks. It wasn't until they were far away from the school gate that the two of them got closer. Sometimes, Lin Li would take his hand and smile brightly at him. Dongyu would look at her gently, just like how he used to stand beside me and gaze at me. Sometimes, Dongyu would gently hug her shoulders. Occasionally, the two of them would play around and do some intimate things. Like a masochist, I witnessed their intimate moments with my own eyes. I often thought that Dongyu must have hugged her often, held her hand, kissed her, and perhaps even slept with her in the future. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but wonder if they had slept together. Had they done such a thing? I felt that it was a little dirty to think about it like this. However, I couldn't help but think about it. It gave me a splitting headache and a heart-wrenching pain. When I was dating Su Qi, I was really attentive and worked hard to cooperate. I walked with him through the streets that I had once walked with Dongyu. I went to the ice cream shop, the movie theater, and the library that I had only been to with Dongyu. I felt like I was copying the shadow of the person in my heart onto Su Qi, but I also felt that it was unfair. But I really didn't know how else I could fall in love with this sunny and handsome boy other than this. But I didn't know how to cut off my feelings for Dongyu. I had asked Su Qi about this before. I asked him, Su Qi, what if you like someone you shouldn't like? He asked me in return, what do you mean by someone you shouldn't like? It's someone you shouldn't like. It's impossible between you and her. We're destined to never be together. How is that possible? I don't believe that. As long as I like someone, I'll go after them until I get them. Then, what if there's really no way to be together? Impossible. I mustered up my courage and asked, what if that person is your sister? Su Qi looked at me and was stunned for a long time. Then he suddenly sneered, how is that possible? This is incestuous sex. I'm not a pervert. As soon as he said that, he was stunned for a long time. Then he looked at me with a meaningful gaze. Perhaps it was from that day onwards that he vaguely sensed the subtle relationship between me and Dongyu. Hence, he would try every means to test me from time to time. I think he must also be wondering if my feelings for Dongyu were what he thought they were. In front of me, he would often bring up the details of Dongyu and Lin Li's relationship. Until one time, when Su Qi took me to a party with his friends, he accidentally mentioned to me at the KTV that he had seen Dongyu and Lin Li walking out of the hotel together. Don't tell me they got a room? His smile was a little frivolous. I was annoyed. Don't spout nonsense if you don't see it with your own eyes. Xiachuan, what should I say about you? What else could the two of them do in a hotel? Other than getting a room, I can't think of any other answer. At the mention of getting a room, I suddenly recalled Su Qi's words. He said that unless it was my resources, he would not act intimately with me. I asked what was too intimate. Chapter 31-33. As he spoke, he put his arm around my shoulder and snorted. My dear wife, why are you so young? You're making me a little afraid to lay my hands on you. Who's your wife? Of course it's you. I'm not your wife. Yes, you are. When you graduate from university, let's get married. That's in the future. No one knows. Su Qi suddenly gripped my shoulder sternly and pretended to be displeased. How could I not know? I've decided on you. I don't care, you're my wife. No one can break us up. Otherwise, what will you do? Su Qi suddenly smiled as innocently as a child. What can I do? I can only pester you for the rest of my life. I snapped out of my thoughts and felt a little lost. Su Qi, don't talk nonsense. He finally couldn't take it anymore. Probably because my expression was too ugly, it confirmed his suspicions. He asked me half-jokingly, Xiachuan, don't tell me, you like Dongyu? I didn't speak. He suddenly took a big gulp of beer and asked, did you agree to date me because you wanted to use me and make me Dongyu's replacement? Halfway through his sentence, his expression turned ugly, but he couldn't continue. I still didn't speak. I just stared at the table and didn't make a sound. He suddenly said seriously, Xiachuan, let's have a good talk. I felt that his serious expression was a little unfamiliar. I smiled and tugged at his arm. Su Qi, I'm tired. My head feels heavy, don't be like this. He pushed me away, looking distant and unfamiliar. I looked at him helplessly, because he would never treat me like this. What's wrong with you? Su Qi suddenly asked. Because I like you, you feel fearless, right? No matter how overboard you are, you're sure that I won't be angry, sad, or disappointed, right? Su Qi, in Xiachuan. Su Qi finally lost control. He probably realized that I had an ulterior motive in dating him. He yelled at me as if hurt. What do you take me for? A replacement? You already have someone you like, don't you? That person is your brother, right? Su Qi said through gritted teeth. Are you crazy? You can't like him. You can't love him. You're siblings. This is incestuous. You can't be together. I know. I understand. I don't think you understand anything at all. I told you I got it. I roared at him with all my might. Su Qi was stunned. I sneered with tears in my eyes. Even you have to remind me of this? I know I can't love him, so I let you love me. Su Qi, didn't you say that you would definitely make me fall in love with you? You're a man of your words. As if waking up from a dream, Su Qi's thin lips trembled slightly. So, you're really using me? He suddenly stood up and kicked over a few bottles of beer beside his feet. His face was livid. In Xiaochuan, what right do you have to toy with me like this? Just because I like you, hopelessly in love with you, so you don't have to worry about my feelings. Chapter 31-34. I was a little afraid of how out of control he was. I stood up and tried to grab his hand. Su Qi, work a little harder. I'm going to fall in love with you soon. Work a little harder. Enough. He stared at me coldly and questioned me with red eyes. How much longer are you going to play with me? I'm not playing with you. No. I'm serious. He suddenly looked at me deeply, his eyes unreadable. It was probably because my attitude wasn't sincere enough. Su Qi bit his lip and laughed in anger. He curled his lips coldly and pretended to be calm. Let's get it over with, okay? I didn't understand Su Qi's anger, just as he couldn't empathize with my despair. I kept asking him to stay, or begged him to take me away. I wanted him to know the torment and struggle in my heart. But his heart seemed to have turned cold. In the end, he ruthlessly withdrew his hand and left without looking back. I was left sitting alone in the private room. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. I must be a terrible girl, I thought. Su Qi, who liked me so much and was so infatuated with me, had decided to give up on me. I'd been abandoned just like that. Why did Su Qi leave? Another boy in the private room walked over. He glanced in the direction of the door, then looked down at me and sat down beside me. Your name is In Xiaochuan, right? The boy casually crushed his cigarette in the ashtray and took a can of beer and placed it in front of me. Ignore him. Drink. I raised my head and glanced at him. He was stunned. Why are you crying? The boy smiled. Did that Su Qi make you angry? Perhaps it was because I felt abandoned that I had a desire to be valued by the world. So much so that when I saw the beer in his hand, I felt as if I could gain everyone's respect by drinking this. I didn't know how to drink. Dongyu had repeatedly warned me not to drink anything handed to me by others outside. But at that time, it was fine if I didn't think of him. When I thought of him, all my nerves screamed and rebelled. This name was a rebellion that seemed to come from my bones. I snatched the beer away, opened the tab, and drank half of it in one go. So straightforward. The boy looked at me with satisfaction. After I finished one, he handed me another. I barely glanced at him as I took the beer from him and poured it down my throat. Back then, learning how to drink was just a momentary thought. He thought about those television dramas. Whenever he encountered something sad, he would drink until he was drunk. How delightful! Could drinking really make one forget everything for a short while? I don't know about the others. I only knew that the side effect of alcohol was that it made memories that weren't very deep in the first place become very deep. Whether it was happiness or pain, they were all torn into pieces. The beautiful memories of the past were especially vivid, so the pain was even more unforgettable. Because of the alcohol, the pain that wasn't very painful became even more painful in an instant. The struggle that was not very torturous became even more torturous. Halfway through the drink, I was drunk and muddle-headed. The painful, entangling, and heart-wrenching things all rushed into my head, tearing, pulling, and roaring. Chapter 31-35. I didn't know that alcohol could force a person into such a state. But I also understood why so many people were obsessed with it. It was because the pain that was usually buried in the bottom of their hearts would only break out when they were on the brink of drunkenness and break free from all restraints. At that moment, when all the pain was released, I felt great. I vaguely remembered grabbing someone's collar and asking, "Tell me, why can't I like In Dongyu? Why can't I kiss him?" Why can't I marry him? Does he reject me when he clearly likes me? Yes. Indong, you liked me. He thought that I would never grow up and would always be that ignorant girl. But couldn't I tell? When we kissed for the first time, I could see the intoxication and struggle in his eyes, the reluctance and conflict. He cruelly pushed me away, but the emotions in his eyes made me realize that he wanted to hug me even more. I hated that I had the same blood as him flowing in my body. If I could, give me a knife and I would be willing to bleed clean. That night, I was surrounded by the strong smell of alcohol and deafening music. Some people say that a girl's first time is like a sacred ceremony. I don't know how to describe my first night. If I had to use words to describe it, it would be like a cruel torture or a sacrifice. I used all my happiness and beauty to pay tribute to my pitiful and humble persistence. This might be the price of growth and sobriety, but the price was too deep. There were many cases of girls going astray during puberty on television. Whether it was the news or television series, it didn't seem to give me much of a warning. The next morning, when I woke up, I opened my eyes and saw an empty ceiling. I stared blankly. What pulled me back to reality was the strangeness of my body. I had read many novels, but there was no description of the first time, such as being run over by a truck or the heart-wrenching pain. However, the burning sensation in a certain part of my body reminded me that my body had quietly changed without my knowledge. I saw the blanket covering me and sat up, only to realize that there was someone lying beside me. When I turned to look, I saw it more clearly. It was an unfamiliar teenager. Who did he say? Why was he lying here too? More importantly, why was he as naked as me? I clenched the blanket tightly and mustered up my courage to look at my body under the blanket. His hand was still wrapped around my waist. I couldn't have been more sober. It was like a blow to the head, and the nerves all over his body were tense to the point of pain. There was a tearing pain at the base of his thigh. What was even more heart-wrenching than this pain was the blankness and numbness in my heart, as well as the little bit of shame I had left. However, I didn't scream. Or perhaps the scream was stuck in my throat because of the humiliation. I couldn't scream or swallow it. I just sat there blankly. It was as if my brain had been emptied by an invisible hand. I didn't shout or cry. I thought it was a dream, and I expected it to be a dream. Chapter 31-36. The boy seemed to have been startled by my continuous trembling. He opened his eyes and sat up. He first rubbed his hair, then turned around and noticed me immediately. "You're awake? When did you wake up?" I didn't dare to speak or look at him. I held on to my weak but foolish hope. He suddenly extended his hand and touched my face. His fingertips brushed against my cheeks and he smiled. "Why are you crying?" He rubbed his wet fingertips on the blanket and got off the bed. He picked up the clothes on the floor and muttered, "It was so rough last night." His sloppy tone was like that of a winner, incomparably proud. Just a few hours ago, he had conquered a city. How could he not be proud? "Put on your clothes since you're awake." He threw my clothes at me. Seeing that I still didn't move, he smiled. "How long do you want to sit here like a fool?" Between the lines, there was a kind of indifference that I abhorred. It was as if what I thought was earth-shattering was nothing in his eyes. I smiled at him foolishly and then asked, "Is it dawn yet?" He was confused at first. Then he walked to the window and lifted the curtains. "It's dawn." In the next second, he pulled the curtains wide open. I desperately wanted the sunlight to drive away the guilt in my heart, but I found that in the warm sunlight, my heart was as cold as ice, without any warmth. I got off the bed and picked up the clothes on the bed. Holding them in my arms, I walked to the bathroom. But as soon as I took a step, a certain part of my body was torn. There was an indescribable pain. There seemed to be something warm sliding down from the bottom of my thigh. He pulled me back and finally looked nervous. "You're not stupid, are you?" I looked at him and shook my head. He glanced at my face and followed my line of sight to look at my body. His gaze immediately fell on my lower body. My shame finally came back and I covered my thigh. But he reached out and touched it. "Why are you still bleeding?" He suddenly laughed. "Why are you bleeding so much? Don't tell me you injured that place. I couldn't get in last night, and you were moving around, so I used a little more force. Did it tear? Do you want me to send you to the hospital to stop the bleeding? It's not that I haven't slept with a virgin before, but it's my first time seeing so much blood. My lips trembled violently and I clutched at my dress. Why don't you take a shower first? Clean yourself up before you put on your clothes. I followed his orders like it was an imperial edict. I walked to the bathroom and stood under the showerhead. As I stood there, something sticky seemed to flow out of my body and slid down. Under the cover of the water, I finally couldn't control my tears, and they overflowed. When they left the hotel, it was already noon. Before he left, he told me his name. Feng Liang. I took the taxi fare he gave me and took a taxi to Han Zhao's house. I didn't have the courage to go back to school for class. I didn't go to class all morning. In my state, when I arrived at the classroom, it would be earth-shattering. I didn't dare to go home and stayed out all night. Whether it was my father, my mother, or Dongyu, once I got home, I would face a trial. Chapter 31-37. Han Zhao's house was in a high-end neighborhood. I didn't know how long I'd been waiting on the steps. I saw a 5-year-old girl practicing riding a bicycle under her father's tutelage on the winding path. I recalled that when I was learning to ride a bicycle as a child, Dongyu would look at me nervously as he carefully controlled the center of gravity of the bicycle behind me. At the time, I was only 6 years old. I stepped on the pedals and gripped the handlebars nervously, looking like I was ready to die. Dongyu told me not to be nervous and to relax as he pushed the bicycle forward. When I first started, I wasn't very proficient and often fell. But every time I was about to fall, Dongyu would rush up. His thin body would always be able to steadily support my center of gravity. Once, when I fell, he cushioned me with his body and I fell into his arms. When I got up, I laughed heartily. When I returned home at night, I found a few abrasions on his back. However, I wasn't ashamed at all. Instead, I laughed at his tender skin. For some reason, I started to miss the innocence and boredom of my childhood. I kept feeling that after I grew up, everything had changed. The burden on my shoulders had become heavier and heavier. In the evening, Han Xiao returned home from school. She walked to the door with her school bag on her back. When she saw me, her expression changed. Xiachuan. I looked up and stood up awkwardly when I saw her. Why are you here? She was a little surprised. You didn't go to school today. Your parents came to look for the form teacher, looking anxious. When I passed by the form teacher's office, I heard your mother say that you didn't come home last night either. They've already gone to the police station to call the police. Han Xiao, I want to stay at your house tonight. Is that okay? I asked carefully. Han Xiao was even more surprised. Are you crazy? Why didn't you come home? I bit my lip. When I thought of what it would be like to go back, I couldn't help but cry. Han Xiao, other than here, I have nowhere else to go. Han Xiao squatted in front of me and cupped my face. Finally, she noticed something strange. Xiachuan, where did you go last night? Tell me. Han Xiao gripped my shoulder tightly and asked anxiously, weren't you with Su Qi last night? You didn't go home. Where did you go? Don't ask any more, okay? I said in despair, don't ask any more. I beg you. Han Xiao hid me in her room. Because I was worried that her parents would find out, I even spoke cautiously. After dinner, Han Xiao returned to her room and brought me a carton of milk. Only this. I'm sorry, Xiachun. She put the milk aside, but I had no appetite at all. I guess that my expression must have looked terrible, so Han Xiao was probably scared out of her wits. She sat beside me, put her arms around my shoulders, and cried, Xiachuan, don't scare me, okay? It was good to talk. Seeing you like this makes me sad as well. But how could she understand my sadness? In just one night, my whole world was shattered. At night, I lay in bed, not daring to close my eyes, because when the world turned dark, the scenes from last night would appear in front of my eyes. I felt so dirty, but when I was bathing, I had already tried my best to scrub my body. I wanted to wash away these sins, wash away the man's scent and the traces he had left behind. Chapter 31-38. However, the truth was that the so-called turning into ashes was just an illusion. I wouldn't be reduced to ashes. In a sense, This could be considered a terrifying form of capital punishment. It was also like a cruel death by 1,000 cuts. Fate would not kill me, but it would torture me until the next layer of flesh was removed. I felt like I had probably received my retribution. Xiaochun, what's wrong? Probably startled by my shaking shoulders, Han Xiao turned on the lights and saw me biting the blanket, gritting my teeth, trying to hold it in. But my tears, one by one, covered the entire pillow. She hugged me, probably trying to give me as much warmth as possible. I greedily wanted to absorb her warmth. I hugged her and said softly, Han Xiao, I'm afraid, I was afraid. I was afraid that sooner or later, this matter would be exposed to the light of day. I was afraid. I was afraid of how Dongyu would look at me with disgust when he found out. I was afraid. What I was most afraid of was being abandoned by the world. The night passed in a daze. The next day, when Han Xiao woke up, I also woke up in a daze. When she saw that I was awake, she asked me to go to school with her. I didn't dare to step through the school gate. I said, I'm not going. You go ahead. She asked me why I wasn't going to school. I didn't say anything else. She tried to persuade me, but I still refused to go. I wrapped myself in the blanket and curled up in the corner, hugging myself. She couldn't do anything to me, so she had to leave. After she left, I locked the door and locked myself in the room. Then I lay on the bed and looked up at the ceiling. My tears fell uncontrollably. At that time, I was so desperate that it felt like the sky was about to fall. But I didn't know who would hold on for me if the sky really did fall. I knew that if I only knew how to cry, I would be too weak. But in that case, other than crying, I didn't know how else to face myself. I had suffered so much for nothing. I didn't feel hungry after not eating for a day. I didn't feel thirsty after not drinking water for a day. In the afternoon, I heard footsteps outside the door. It seemed like someone had returned. They hugged their shoulders timidly and shivered. Then, someone knocked on the door. I didn't dare to speak or make any noise. I was afraid that it was Han Zhao's parents, but I heard Han Zhao's voice. Xiaochun, it's me, Han Xiao. Only then did I get out of bed. I walked to the door and unlocked it. Just as I opened the door, I saw Dongyu standing upright at the door. Seeing the door open, he barged in without waiting for me to react. The door was instantly flung open. I retreated in fear, glaring at him with a pale face. His face was filled with anxiety, anger, worry, and worry. Why didn't you go home? Dongyu approached me and questioned me angrily. Where did you go the night before? Do you know that Dad and Mom have been looking for you like crazy? They've already called the police. They thought that you were missing and that something had happened to you. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Then, the anger of betrayal surged from my heart. I looked at Han Xiao. Her thin body shrank to the side as if she was afraid that I would vent my anger on her. She didn't dare to look up at my eyes. Don't look at him. This matter has nothing to do with her. As Dongyu spoke, he reached out to grab my arm. Chapter 31-39. I saw his face stiffen. His eyes froze. Why? Dirty? I hugged my arms, not wanting him to touch me. I just didn't want to dirty his hands. I felt dirty. There were stains all over my body that couldn't be washed clean. In my heart, Dongyu was so inviolable that I didn't want to dirty his hands. But he seemed to have misunderstood me. When he heard the word coming out of my mouth, he slowly retracted his hand in midair. I saw his eyes darken. There was no longer any light in them. There was even an indescribable sense of loss. It was as if he was asking, "How did you become like this?" I couldn't stand the look in his eyes. I lowered my head and squatted down helplessly. I didn't know how long he stood there, nor did I know how long he had been scrutinizing me. I only saw him suddenly turn around and leave. Despite Han Zhao's repeated attempts to persuade him to stay, he left without looking back. Han Xiao chased after him out the door. After some time, she returned resentfully. She looked at me helplessly. Xiaochuan, what's wrong with you? You didn't say a word. You didn't even mention a word. What exactly happened that night? I didn't say anything. I only knew that Dongyu had left. But I thought to myself, go as far as you can. Don't look back again. I didn't need him to care about me anymore. That night, I still didn't eat. Han Xiao couldn't persuade me otherwise. My indifference almost made her break down. Just as she was at a loss, her mother shouted outside the door, "Xiao Xiao, someone's looking for you." Han Xiao went out. A few minutes later, the door was pushed open again. However, I sensed that the footsteps coming in were different. I finally looked up and saw Su Qi walk into the room with a pale face. When he saw me, he stood there in a daze for a long time before he walked up to me and squatted down. He reached out and wanted to hug me. Surprisingly, I didn't push him away like I had pushed Dongyu away. I only remember that when he was about to hug me, my mind was blank. I couldn't think of anything and didn't dare to think of anything. But later, I realized that perhaps at that time, I needed a warm embrace too much. The warmth I wanted, Su Qi couldn't give me. However, I didn't dare to hope for the warmth that Dongyu could give me. Other than Su Qi, I didn't know anyone else who could give me such warmth. When he hugged me, my tears flowed out of my eyes like a broken dam. I couldn't hold them back any longer. Perhaps it was my tears or my suppressed sobs that made him feel as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. He hugged me tightly and sobbed, "It's my fault. Don't cry." The more I heard this, the more I cried. I asked him, "Why did you leave me behind yesterday?" He asked almost impulsively. His entire body froze, as if all the blood in his body had frozen. To him, these words were undoubtedly a knife that pierced his heart. He rubbed my shoulder guiltily, his voice trembling badly. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you behind yesterday." I asked him repeatedly in despair, "Why did you abandon me? Why? Why did you leave me behind?" "Su Qi, I didn't toy with you. I really didn't." Chapter 3140. Su Qi hugged me and apologized profusely, at a loss. "I'll never leave you behind again." I cried even harder, thinking, how great would it be if I could turn back time? But there was no medicine for regret in this world, much less a time machine. I couldn't travel back in time, much less start over. But I didn't blame him, because I was the one who brought it upon myself. Perhaps it was because I was an extreme person in my bones. Even though I knew that I liked someone who was impossible, I was still eager to try. I repeatedly questioned this proposition, and in the end, I got myself bruised all over. Su Qi was also a victim. What right did I have to blame him? That night, he accompanied me home. In the past, he had only sent me downstairs. But this time, I paced back and forth downstairs, worried that I would be greeted by a storm when I entered the house. Su Qi saw that I was hesitating and didn't dare to go upstairs. He suddenly took my hand and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." I was even more stunned when I heard this. Dongyu had said this to me countless times. But in many moments of despair, he wasn't by my side. I didn't know how trustworthy Su Qi's words were. It was because he was too young that he made some heavy promises casually. The promise he made back then was a sincere one. But he didn't fulfill it, and he really couldn't fulfill it. I had also changed from being firm in the beginning to being cautious. Su Qi held my hand as the two of them walked up the stairs and knocked on the door. It was my mother who opened the door. When she saw me, she reached out and grabbed my collar, pulling me home. When Su Qi saw this, he rushed over in fright and shielded me from her. He said, "Auntie, calm down." "Who are you?" My mother got even angrier when she saw him. My father walked out of the study. When he saw me, there was something wrong with his expression. He was worried, distressed, angry, and had mixed feelings. Dongyu was in the living room. When he saw me, he suddenly stood up and entered the study. My heart sank. Su Qi turned to look at me, then at my mother. He said softly, "My name is Su Qi. I'm Xiaochuan's boyfriend." "What? Boyfriend?" My mother couldn't accept it and rebuked him. "Are you kidding me? Our Xiaochuan is still in junior high school. Boyfriend? When did this happen?" "We've been dating for a year." Su Qi took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry. But I really like Xiaochuan. If it's possible, I'll consider marrying Xiaochuan after she's successfully admitted to university." "Get married? What a joke." I suddenly felt that his hand was very hot. I retracted my hand and said angrily, Su Chi, don't talk nonsense. We've already broken up. I thought about what had happened that night and felt even more embarrassed. After that incident, my entire life seemed to have been turned upside down. Even my relationship with Su Chi had changed subtly. I didn't dare to have any extravagant hopes. Marriage between him and me in the future was even more ridiculous. Perhaps it was the word break up that made her mother feel even more unreasonable. She flew into a rage. Xiaochuan, how old do you think you are? Dating and breaking up. Do you still want to study? Do you still want to enter high school? I was silent. Chapter 3141. What do you have to promise me? What do you have to swear to me? Do you know how terrible her monthly test results were this time? My mother suddenly waved her hand. Let's not talk about this. Xiaochuan, let me ask you, where have you been for the past 2 days? Do you know that your father and I were worried that something had happened to you? We called the police. Your father and I haven't been at work for the past 2 days, and Dongyu hasn't been in class either. We've been looking for you everywhere. Are you playing with us? I didn't dare to make a sound. I didn't know how to explain. Su Chi suddenly said, She was at my house yesterday. I was stunned. I glared at him and said angrily, Su Chi, don't talk nonsense. My mother was even more surprised. Her eyes were full of emotions. What did you say? Auntie, Xiaochuan has been with me for the past 2 days, but don't worry. Before Su Chi could finish, my mother couldn't control herself and slapped me in the face. You immoral thing. She seemed to feel embarrassed and even angrier. She grabbed my collar and slapped me twice. She questioned angrily, I've always told you that girls should have self-respect and self-respect. Have you turned a deaf ear to my words? Huh. I'll teach you a lesson today. As she spoke, she pointed at Su Chi and said, And you, I'll talk to your parents about this tomorrow. I covered my face and knelt on the ground, crying bitterly. Mom, hit me, I know I was wrong, but let Su Chi off. This has nothing to do with him. I wasn't with him. For an entire week, I was locked up at home to reflect on my mistakes. After that, my mother took me to the school to find the form teacher and gave me a harsh scolding. I didn't return home at night and skipped class. The form teacher originally wanted to keep me in school for probation, but after my mother's repeated pleas, I was given a demerit. At that time, the school's punishments were divided according to the circumstances. They were a warning, a serious warning, a demerit, a major demerit, probation, and expulsion. My case wasn't particularly serious. After the form teacher calmed down, it was just a demerit that would take a year to get rid of. At that time, a demerit was already a major punishment. If it couldn't be removed, it would affect my entrance exams. After the demerit, every time school ended, Mom would ask Dongyu to come home with me. Obviously, she wanted to separate me from Su Chi. One day during class, I climbed over the school wall and asked to meet Su Chi. Before he could speak, I said, Su Chi, let's break up. Su Chi was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He immediately grabbed my shoulder and said in a trembling voice, I don't want to. That night, I wanted to break up because I was angry. It couldn't be counted at all. I regret it. I don't want to break up with you. Let's get back together and start anew, okay? I burst into tears. Holding back my tears, I pried his hand off one finger at a time as I choked. It's too late. It's too late. What's too late? He panicked. I don't understand what you're saying. We can't go back anymore. I said, Su Chi, let me go. Let's break up. No. Chapter 3142. As I cried, I said, I regret it. I don't want to be with you anymore. I hate you. I'm tired of you. Is that enough? Su Chi, will you let me go? I don't like you, so don't force me, okay? I yelled at him hysterically. In despair, my body slid weakly along the wall. I thought to myself, let me fend for myself. No one should care about me. Besides, I really didn't know how to face Su Chi or Dongyu. My world was completely out of touch with theirs. I hugged my knees and cried silently, gritting my teeth. Su Chi, on the other hand, stood in front of me at a loss. He wanted to touch me, but when he reached out, he saw my shoulders curling up. His hand eventually froze in midair and slowly retracted. After that day, Su Qi and I didn't see each other again. He didn't look for me again, and I didn't look for him again. Every day, I went to school alone and finished school alone. When I got home, I did my homework in silence. I felt as obedient as a walking corpse. Until one day. That morning, I flipped open my calendar. It was May 10th, a special day. Ever since the second half of the first semester of the first year of junior high school, my period had come on the 9th of every month as scheduled. However, it was unexpectedly absent that month. I waited for it for a long time. Even after a long week, it still didn't appear. I panicked. In junior high school, although we were ignorant about the matters between men and women, we already had a vague idea. I already knew that what was supposed to come would come. If it didn't, something must have happened. During computer science class, I secretly went online to check for information. The reasons why my period didn't come were more or less the same. However, the biggest suspect was that I might have been pregnant. After computer science class, I didn't know how I felt when I walked the short few hundred meters between the computer classroom and my classroom. Pregnant. This word was too heavy for me to bear. I didn't dare to go to the hospital for a checkup. After 3 days of internal struggle, I finally mustered up the courage and walked into the pharmacy after school. Under the guidance of my teacher, I bought a few pregnancy tests. God knows how I walked in and how I left. From the beginning to the end, I kept my head down, not daring to meet the strange gazes of those people. However, I could still hear many people whispering behind my back. They were all talking about how children nowadays were. She was so young, but she got pregnant. She had no self-respect at all. Kids these days are really amazing. When I was her age, I didn't even dare to hold a boy's hand. Like an army deserter, I ran out of the pharmacy. I don't know. I didn't know that such a thing would happen, and I didn't know that there would be such a thing as an accidental pregnancy. I don't understand. After that incident, I should have taken the morning after pill in time. At that time, parents were very vague about the relationship between men and women. The early sex education classes only described the differences between men and women, but they didn't tell us how to deal with the aftermath of an accident. My mother only told me not to fall in love at an early age, but she didn't say that I would get pregnant after sleeping with a boy. The pharmacy staff said that it was best to do a pregnancy test in the morning. The first morning urine test was the most accurate. Chapter 3143. I took the test twice in total. On the first night, I didn't sleep well because I was too nervous. The test results didn't seem to be accurate. There was only one bar, indicating that I wasn't pregnant. However, this result wasn't accurate, so I didn't relax much. 2 days later, I took the test again. However, I saw that there were 2 bars on the test paper. One was a clear bar, and the other was a very faint color. I didn't know what this meant, so I went to the pharmacy to ask again. The person at the counter said casually, "That means you're pregnant. Go back and tell your parents about this. You probably went to the hospital to abort your pregnancy not long ago." How did I abort it? Just like that. She suddenly looked at me curiously, her eyes full of disdain. I say, "You're so young, yet you got pregnant. But I don't think you have any shame at all. Didn't your family tell you that girls have to have self-respect and self-respect? If you had an abortion at such a young age, who would dare to marry you when you grow up?" I didn't know how she could say such cruel words so casually. I didn't say anything and left with my head lowered. After leaving the pharmacy, I sat on the steps, hugged my knees, and cried helplessly. Abortion? An abortion should cost a lot of money, right? But I couldn't afford that much money. This news was like a bolt from the blue. I felt like I was in hell, isolated and helpless. At that time, the only person I could think of was Han Xiao. When I returned home from school, I suddenly pulled her aside and stammered, hesitating to speak. She saw that I was talking about something else with a strange expression on my face. I couldn't string together a coherent sentence for a long time. She was a little anxious. "Xiachun, what's wrong? What's the matter?" Han Xiao. My voice trembled violently as soon as I spoke. Perhaps she had also noticed my strange expression, so she finally looked at me seriously. What's wrong? I think I'm pregnant. My voice was like a mosquito's. Every word was squeezed out from between my teeth. When Han Xiao heard this, her expression changed drastically. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What? I haven't had my period in a long time. I've taken 2 tests and I think I'm pregnant. What should I do? Do you know anything about this? How did she get pregnant? You and that man? She stopped abruptly. She was afraid that she would agitate me, so she asked, "Didn't you take any precautions?" Even more embarrassed, I bit my lip and shook my head. Han Xiao was also at a loss. She said anxiously, "I don't know much about this either. Why don't you take a leave and I'll accompany you to the hospital for a checkup? Then if you're pregnant, do a painless abortion." Advertisements for painless abortions could be found all over the streets. I said helplessly, "But I heard that abortion surgery costs a lot of money. I can't afford it. It's impossible for me to ask my mother for it. She won't give it to me. If she asks for the reason, I can't say, she'll definitely break my leg." Han Xiao immediately calmed me down. "Don't be nervous. I'll ask around for you. There should be other ways besides abortion. Don't worry." On the way home, we passed by the pharmacy. Han Xiao asked me to wait for her there while she ran into the pharmacy. 15 minutes later, she walked out with a red face and a box of well-packaged medicine in her hand. Chapter 3144. Holding back her anger, she handed the medicine to me and said, "The pharmacy staff said that if you're not pregnant for long, you can use medicine to induce an abortion. Xiaochuan, do you still remember the last time you had your period?" I stuttered, last month. Han Xiao looked at the instructions on the medicine box and said, "Go home and try taking this medicine. However, I heard that if you undergo an abortion, it will be very painful. The pharmacy staff said that after taking the medicine, a small blood clot will be expelled. That is the pregnancy sac. If that is expelled, it means that the abortion was successful." Holding the medicine, I asked nervously, "How much is this medicine? I'll pay you back." "No need, it's not expensive." She waved her hand and said, "Hurry up and take it. They said that the sooner the better, the less damage it will cause to your body." I nodded. When I got home and opened the door, Dongyu was not back yet. I clutched the medicine box tightly and entered the study. After closing the door, I carefully took out the medicine box and read the instructions carefully. It was difficult for me to read it. I didn't understand the instructions on it. Just as I was feeling confused, I heard the door open behind me. I was shocked and hurriedly stuffed the medicine box into the drawer to hide it. When I turned around, I saw that it was Dongyu. My expression became even more embarrassed. "Brother?" I called out to him softly, pretending that nothing had happened. Dongyu sized me up for a moment and suddenly questioned me, "What were you holding in your hand just now?" "Medicine." I subconsciously let it slip. I immediately bit my lip and stopped talking. He raised his handsome eyebrows and became more and more puzzled. "Medicine?" "Cold medicine." He immediately walked over nervously and reached out to touch my forehead. "Have you caught a cold?" I dodged like a snake and waved his hand away, resisting, "Don't touch me." His expression froze and his gaze turned slightly cold. I immediately said, "Don't worry about me, okay? I can take care of myself." Dongyu looked at me quietly for a moment. Without saying anything, he turned around and left the study. Bang! The door was slammed shut with a deafening sound. I turned around mechanically and slowly opened the drawer. Looking at the medicine box lying quietly in the drawer, my heart was in a mess. Not long after, my parents came home from work. After finishing my homework and dinner, I hid in the bathroom. Just as I was about to take my medicine, I heard footsteps outside the door. My heart raced and I felt guilty. The next day, during the morning self-study session, Han Xiao handed him a note and asked, "Did you take your medicine yesterday? What do you think? Did everything go well?" I looked at the beautiful handwriting on the note and crumpled it into a ball with mixed feelings. After class, Han Xiao found me and asked me why I hadn't replied to her. I said, "My family was around last night, so it wasn't convenient." "Then what should we do? If I don't eat it early, will it have no effect?" Han Xiao was extremely worried. I leaned against the wall, head down, eyes empty. However, she suddenly said, "Why don't you come to my house tonight and tell your mom that you're coming to my house to do your homework? I'll cover for you while you take your medicine." I remained silent. Han Xiao was also silent for a moment. Suddenly she asked, "Don't tell me you can't bear to abort it? How could that be?" I looked up with reddened eyes and said, "I can't wait for this. I can't wait for it to not exist. Why would I be reluctant?" Chapter 3145. It was said that only a man who had gone through 10 months of pregnancy, accompanied his wife during her pregnancy, prepared for labor, and gave birth, and took good care of his wife and child while his wife was breastfeeding could officially become a qualified stay-at-home dad. Although a certain man was a veteran in business, he was still a newcomer in the world of stay-at-home dads. Now, he was already a stay-at-home dad of 3 children. This was the first time in his life that he had experienced breastfeeding. Although he had done a lot of homework before, when it came to the real battle, Mu Yaja was still caught off guard. Wah 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 wah. In the middle of the night, in the crib, the little Yueyao struggled for a while before suddenly wailing. Unknowingly, the little Yueyao was already 5 months old. After moving back from the confinement center, Mu Yaja considered for a long time before finally placing the crib in the bedroom. The master bedroom was a very large suite with a living room, a study, and a private bathroom. It was designed in the same way as the suite in the presidential hotel. As for the location of the crib, firstly, he did not want little Yueyao to disturb the married life that he had been looking forward to for a long time. It had not been easy for him to survive 10 months of pregnancy, childbirth, and confinement. A certain man had long reached his limit. He was filled with ambition and was finally able to realize his married life. He sighed inwardly. However, if the crib was placed in another position, what if he couldn't hear the little Yueyao's cries in the middle of the night? Sometimes, when the little princess was hungry, he had to wake up in the middle of the night to feed her. Mu Yaja considered for a long time before finally deciding to temporarily place the crib in the bedroom. In the past few days, because of the wedding preparations, he had been racking his brains. During the day, he was busy with the company's affairs. When he returned home at night, he had to personally participate in the wedding design. No matter how big or small, he had to personally look over everything. He had to repeatedly confirm and modify a plan several times before it was approved. At night, on time, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the little Yueyao would definitely kick her little legs and ask for milk. It was as if the little one's arrival was to overdraft his excess energy. It was very rare for Yun Xianxia to get up to feed the babies. Her physique was not very good. If she got up in the middle of the night, she would not be able to fall asleep again. After the confinement period, she still had to pay more attention to recuperation. After all, childbirth was quite damaging to a woman's vitality. Therefore, every time before going to bed, Yun Xianxia would use a breast pump to store enough milk in a milk bottle and place it in the refrigerator to cool. When the little Yueyao wanted to drink it, Mu Yaja only needed to warm it up. As for her, all she had to do was to put on her earplugs and rest. At first, when Mu Yaja suggested that he would be the one feeding her at night, Yun Xianxia had some misgivings. After all, his work was not easy. He had to get up in the middle of the night to take care of Xiao Budian, which was too strenuous. However, Mu Yaja said that, not to mention that Yun Xianxia had just undergone surgery and still needed to recuperate, he enjoyed his passion for this job. However, a certain man had other plans in his heart. It was said that children at this age would start to recognize people. If he took care of her more when she slowly grew up, she would definitely be the closest to him. Therefore, with this selfish motive, a certain new stay-at-home dad started his real life of taking care of a baby. Chapter 3146. Over time, he had figured out the pattern of his little princess. Usually, around 2 in the morning, this little princess would be hungry. Her biological clock was excessively accurate. She couldn't be a minute earlier or a minute later. Speaking of which, this little Yueyao was quite interesting. She was still a small ball of glutinous rice, but she already had the demeanor of a queen. Whenever she cried, if he didn't rush over immediately to coax her in his arms, her cries would become louder by a few decibels if he was a few minutes late. Mu Yaja woke up at once when he heard her cries. He immediately got up from the bed and, with his slightly messy black hair, shuffled over to the crib as if he were sleepwalking, as if he was familiar with the place. This route had already become a subtle influence on him. The moment he heard the cries, he instinctively felt his way over without turning on the lights. Little Yueyao's cries grew louder. Mu Yaja squinted his sleepy eyes and hugged the soft little fellow in his arms. He coaxed her gently, Yes. Your Majesty, this subject came too late to rescue you. This subject deserves 1,000 deaths. This subject knows his mistake. Your Majesty, please forgive this subject. When he opened his mouth, his voice was extremely hoarse. The sensor lights lit up. He looked down and saw that little Yueyao's little face was red from crying as if she had been greatly wronged. Mu Yaja carried her into the living room. There was a crib in the living room. He placed her in it first, then quickly took out a milk bottle from the refrigerator. He quickly heated it up and shook it. Then he walked over to the crib and carried Yueyao. She was still crying so hard that her little mouth was wide open. Mu Yaja took the opportunity to stuff the pacifier into her little mouth. Little Yueyao almost instinctively sucked on the pacifier. Her two tender little hands hugged the milk bottle just like that as she sucked on the milk. In the beginning, when they were changing the milk bottle, little Yueyao was a little unhappy. When it was stuffed into her mouth, she turned her head from time to time and rubbed against it, refusing to drink the milk obediently. Speaking of which, there was a slight difference between a milk bottle and a human's breasts. Hence, little Yueyao was very disdainful of the milk bottle. However, when it came to this, Yu was smart. He found a spare milk bottle and poured Coke into it. Then, he stood by the crib and started to drink the Coke with relish in front of little Yueyao. Why else would there be a saying that out of someone else's pot was always the best? Little Yueyao was only a few months old. She already knew this. Hence, when she saw him hugging the milk bottle with relish, her originally tearful eyes. Her eyes widened in curiosity as she watched Yu sucking the cola from the milk bottle. Craving for it, she reached out her chubby little hands, wanting to drink it. Yu deliberately refused to give it to her, so little Yueyao grabbed his hand and asked for it. Yu waved the milk bottle in his hand to show off. He had an arrogant look on his face and refused to let her drink. Little Yueyao became anxious and started to cry loudly. Seizing this opportunity, Yu swapped the milk bottle and stuffed it into her arms. Little Yueyao was satisfied. She hugged the milk bottle and stopped crying. She smiled with tears in her eyes. Mu Yaja quickly took the milk bottle and fed it to her. Chapter 3147. Thus, Yun Shirshir had no choice but to squeeze the milk into a milk bottle and store it in the freezer. This was a good thing. After all, when little Yueyao drank milk, it often hurt her. Using a breast pump to suck the milk out would make her feel better. Thus, as time passed, little Yueyao started to drink milk from a milk bottle in advance. Mu Yaja carried Yueyao to the sofa and lowered his head to watch her drink milk. Little Yueyao's eyes were red from crying earlier, as if they had been dyed with rouge. With tears in the corners of her eyes, she hugged the milk bottle as if she had walked in the desert for several days and nights and finally found a clear spring. She drank it in big gulps as if she was thirsty. What a greedy little kitten! Mu Yaja gently scratched the tip of her nose. His heart felt as if it had been filled to the brim. But as she drank, she looked at him with her eyes wide open. Seeing that he was gazing at her gently, little Yueyao actually smiled with tears in her eyes. With this smile, the entire world seemed to brighten up. Especially when there were tears in the corners of her eyes and her eyes were still red, when she smiled, it gave off the feeling of being enchanting. She was still a baby. How could she smile so beautifully? This pair of eyes gave her quite a lot of points. The black and white were distinct, and they were round and big. Based on the contours of her eyes, one could imagine that this pair of eyes resembled her mother's. Her almond-shaped eyes were extremely alluring. Just holding this little girl like this, Mu Yaja felt a great sense of accomplishment. This sense of accomplishment was definitely not something that could be compared to signing a few billion-dollar contracts. When he hugged her, he felt as if he owned the whole world. This was probably how it felt to be a father for the first time. Mu Yaja had an impulse to bring all the best things in the world to her. In the past, he had been ruthless in his career purely because of his ambition and his struggle against fate. In such a frightening family, survival of the fittest was the law of the jungle. But now, his ruthlessness in his career had redefined himself and he had a firm goal. His ambition was to give his wife and daughter a better life. Now, he had a wife whom he loved deeply and 3 children whom he loved dearly. In order to give them the best life in the world, he naturally had to give it his all. Hence, Wuxia was even more motivated than before when it came to work. However, he didn't neglect his other 2 sons and his wife just because of little Yueyao's birth. He knew that the happy life and complete family he had today were all thanks to this woman. Therefore, he doted on her even more than before, just so that when their hair was white, he could hold her hand and ask her if she was happy with him in this life. Without hesitation, she could say, yes. To him, this was the true achievement of his life. This man was very clear about the position of everyone he cared about. Whether it was Yu, Xiao Yichen, or even little Yueyao, they were all his loved ones. However, they were destined to be passers-by and travelers. When they grew up one day, they would have their other halves sooner or later. Yu and Xiao Yichen would meet their destined love, and little Yueyao would have her life partner. Chapter 3148. When it was time to feed, Yu got up and went to the bathroom. When he walked out of the room and passed by the living room, he saw Wuxia sitting on the sofa and feeding Yueyao. He immediately woke up and ran over to Wuxia's side. He snuggled up to Wuxia and looked at the little Yueyao who was happily munching on the milk bottle. Wuxia glanced at Yu and saw that he was drowsy. One of his eyes was open and the other was closed. His eyelids were swollen and hazy, and he couldn't even open his eyes. He couldn't help but say unhappily, "Go to sleep if you're tired." "Oh no, I want to watch over my little sister." Wuxia snorted coldly and shielded the little Yueyao. "It's not like you don't have the chance to see her. Take me for example. I can only hug her for a while at night." Yu looked at him. From his words, he felt that his father was a little jealous. It was probably because he didn't want to let go of the little Yueyao and didn't let him hug her. Now that he had the rare opportunity to hug the little princess, his expression was guarded as if he was guarding against a thief. It was as if he would snatch the little Yueyao away the next second and run away. How childish. "Daddy, you're already so old. Why are you still acting like a little kid? You can hug her. No one will snatch her away from you." Wuxia was speechless. This guy. Ever since Yueyao was 5 months old, the ban on visitation was lifted. When Xianxia returned home from the confinement center, many people called and said that they wanted to visit her. However, Wuxia said that the child was too young and it wasn't convenient for strangers to visit her. But in reality, he had his own selfish motives. His daughter had just been born and he hadn't seen enough of her yet. When he thought about how he had to take care of the guests coming and going, he would have less time to spend with the child. He couldn't be bothered to entertain the guests who came to visit, so he made it clear that he was in a state of declining visitors. When the little Yueyao was a little bigger, his excuse would no longer be valid. Hence, on the first day after the ban was lifted, Jiang Shen and Lu Jinyu took advantage of the company's lunch break and rushed over with their bags. Xianxia hadn't even served them tea yet, but they couldn't wait to run to the crib and surround it to look at the little queen lying in the crib. Little Yueyao could already lift her legs. It was said that babies at this age had very soft bones, but she could already lift her little feet. She held the soles of her feet with both hands and rolled around, enjoying herself. Little Yueyao wasn't afraid of strangers when she saw him. She blinked her watery eyes as if she was examining him. When Jiang Shen saw the little princess, he exclaimed and covered his mouth. His heart was about to melt. "So cute, so cute." Jiang Shen was a well-known lolicon. Lu Jinyu joked that if he gave birth to a daughter in the future, he would definitely be the world's top daughter slave. He loved beautiful little princesses the most. When he saw little Yueyao, it was as if he had lost his life. Little Yueyao had already grown up. Her fair and tender skin looked as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. It was as fair and flawless as a freshly peeled shell. Other than her frighteningly thick eyelashes, she resembled Xianxia more. Her nose was still indistinguishable, but just by looking at the sharp tip of her nose, she seemed to have inherited Mu Yaja's high nose bridge. It was very exquisite. Her little mouth was small and cherry pink. She looked like Xianxia. Chapter 3149. They had specially rushed over while Mu Yaja was in a meeting at the company. If Mu Yaja were around, he probably wouldn't bear to let them touch even a strand of her hair. Xianxia saw Jiang Xin's eager expression and then turned to look at Lu Jinyu, whose eyes were glistening at the side. How could she bear to reject them? But do you know how to carry a child? A 5-month-old child's bones are very soft. You have to be careful when carrying her. Sit. I've carried a child before. I know how to carry a child. After Jiang Xin's older sister gave birth to her second child, he had carried a child. He had also asked his older sister for some tips on how to carry a child. Hence, he was rather confident in carrying a child. Yu and Xiao Yichen stared at them from the side. When Jiang Xin successfully carried little Yueyao into his arms, Yu took a closer look at him. She was really relieved when she saw that Jiang Xin indeed knew how to carry a child. This small detail fell into Xianxia's eyes and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are these two guys going to follow in their father's footsteps and become cis-obsessed from now on? However, not long after Jiang Xin carried the little princess in his arms, he saw that little Yueyao had stopped moving and was staring at him eagerly. Suddenly, she turned her head and glanced at Xianxia, who was standing at the side and looking at her with a smile. Suddenly, the corners of her mouth wrinkled slightly. It was as if a storm was brewing under the calm surface. Jiang Xun saw her little face contorted. Before he could figure out what was going on, he saw little Yueyao clench her little pink fists and open her mouth to cry. Boah! Little Yueyao had never liked to cry. However, whenever a stranger carried her, she would be very shy. When there was no room for her to struggle, she knew how to express her dissatisfaction by crying. Otherwise, how could she be described as a noble little queen? Now, she was very good at recognizing people. Apart from Mu Yaja, Gong Jie, and Xianxia, even Yu and Xiao Yichen seemed to be condescending to be carried by these two little guys. It was fine if it was for a short period of time, but if it was for a longer period of time, she would get impatient and cry even harder. This little Yueyao wasn't someone who could be controlled by ordinary people. Even Xianxia was surprised. When he was young Yu's. Back then, no matter who carried him, he just didn't smile and would keep a straight face, but he didn't cry so easily either. However, this Yueyao was very arrogant. It was not a problem for Mu Yaja and Gong Jie to carry her. However, even when Hua Jin carried her, she was very repulsed. Xianxia said, "Hua Jin, you didn't breastfeed her or change her diapers. Naturally, Yueyao doesn't like you." However, Hua Jin felt extremely aggrieved. He wanted to change her diapers, but there were always people lining up to do something like changing diapers. For example, Mu Yaja, Gong Jie, and Xianxia. How could he have a chance? He didn't have the experience of being a stay-at-home dad. Everyone thought that he was clumsy, but who hadn't gone through the process? Moreover, there was a period of time when Hua Jin went to film, saying that he wanted to earn money for little Yueyao's milk powder. However, Mu Yaja emphasized, "I'll earn money for the milk powder. Then I'll earn money for Yueyao's toys, okay?" Chapter 3150. However, Jiang Xun felt aggrieved. How long had he held her in his arms? It hadn't even been half a minute. Why was she crying so hard? She wasn't giving him any face at all. Seeing this, Yu finally felt satisfied. He was overjoyed. "Ah, I knew it. How could little sister be so easily hugged? My little sister is very prideful. Not just anyone can hug her. She's very shy with strangers. If she doesn't like someone, she won't even let him hug her for a second." He emphasized the word, "someone she doesn't like." Jiang Xun felt that he was being attacked for no reason. He protested innocently, "I've only just met the little princess for the first time. If it weren't for boss, I would have won the little princess's heart long ago." "Yu, what are you talking about? You're not loving at all. Why aren't you comforting Uncle Jiang? Instead, you're gloating at his misfortune." "Because he can't hug little sister for long. If he hugs her for too long, she'll cry too." He doesn't give her any face at all. Xiao Yichen mercilessly exposed him. Yu Yu's smug face instantly darkened. His little face fell as he rebuked Xiao Yichen. Do I need you to expose me? You make it sound as if you can hug her for a long time. I deliberately timed it last time. Xiao Yichen said self-righteously. I hugged Yue for 3 minutes and 11 seconds before she cried. Yun Shishir found it interesting and asked, then how long did you persist in hugging little sister? 1 minute and 59 seconds. Xiao Yichen put his hands on his waist, feeling very proud of himself. Yu Yu's face darkened even more. He glared at Xiao Yichen angrily. Lu Jinyu found the two little fellows too adorable. He was convulsing with laughter at Xiao Yichen's serious tone. These two little fellows were too funny. Little Yue saw that they were chatting happily and seemed to have neglected him, so he cried even louder. Yun Shishir was about to say that she would take over when Lu Jinyu volunteered, let me try carrying him instead. Jiang Shen refused. Lu Jinyu said, you must think that you'll lose face if Yue laughs if I carry you. Are you scared? Who said I'm a coward? Jinyu, it's the same even if you carry him. This little guy is very good at recognizing people. If you don't believe me, you can try. Naturally, Lu Jinyu refused to admit defeat. He walked forward and carefully took the baby Yue from his hands. As soon as he took the baby, the Yue saw that it was someone else. However, when it opened its eyes and saw that it wasn't the person it wanted, it seemed to be angry and cried louder. It even raised its 2 stubby legs and kicked Lu Jinyu fiercely. How much strength could a 5-month-old baby have in his legs? Moreover, Lu Jinyu often worked out and had a lot of strength in his arms. Her kick didn't hurt or itch at all. He didn't feel anything at all. However, it was obvious that the little fellow was very repulsed by him. Jiang Shen was smug when he saw this. See, I told you, this little Yue can recognize people. She'll cry even if you carry her. However, Lu Jinyu was indignant. You only know how to make sarcastic remarks. Yun Shishir couldn't stand it anymore. She saw that Yue was crying so hard that her voice was hoarse. Afraid that she would cry until she fainted, Yun Shishir immediately walked forward and said, let me carry her. Our savior is here, our savior is here. Lu Jinyu said, breaking out in cold sweat. Chapter 3151. Seeing that I had lost control of my emotions, Han Xiao immediately hugged my shoulders gently. Everything will pass. Although I don't know what happened, Xiaochuan. I will be with you. Han Xiao, will you look down on me? I asked in a choked voice. I really don't know. I didn't want to. I feel like a failure, so dirty. The people at the pharmacy said that my life is over. It will become a stain that I can't erase. What should I do? Han Zhao's eyes reddened when she saw that I was crying. She said, Xiaochuan, don't let your imagination run wild. Don't worry, no matter what happens, I will believe you. Ectopic pregnancy was a terrifying nightmare for women. I didn't know what ectopic pregnancy meant when I was young, and I didn't know that ectopic pregnancy couldn't be aborted with medicine. It could be fatal. At that time, because of my shame, I didn't dare to step into a place like the hospital. In my heart, doctors were sacred. I couldn't imagine what kind of methods the doctor would use to examine my body when I stood in the consultation room, and then what kind of gaze he would use to look at me. So, with that kind of opportunity, I might be able to avoid even greater harm. However, at that time, I was lost and didn't have a pair of hands to guide me out of this foggy swamp. Han Xiao took me home, and Han Zhao's parents warmly entertained me for dinner. After dinner, Han Xiao encouraged them to go out for a walk. This way, I would have a chance. She pushed me into the bathroom and urged, hurry up and take your medicine, before my parents come back. Will there be a lot of bleeding? I asked worriedly. There will be bleeding, but the person at the pharmacy said that if it's used properly, there won't be any danger. Han Xiao hesitated. Actually, it's best to go to the hospital and take it under the doctor's guidance. However, I don't think you'll want to go. I'm not going to the hospital. I trembled at the mention of the hospital. Han Xiao immediately comforted me. It's okay, Xiaochuan. Don't be so sensitive. You're not a criminal. Why would I force you to go to the hospital? I glanced at her gratefully. Thank you, Hanxiao. She nodded and closed the door considerately. I sat on the toilet and opened the box. Then, I quickly glanced at the instructions and swallowed the medicine with warm water. At first, there wasn't any reaction when I took the medicine. Just as I was worried that the medicine wouldn't work, about 10 minutes later, when I stood up and was about to leave, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. What was different from the pain of menstruation was that this kind of pain was the pain of falling. It was as if something was fiercely sawing at something in my stomach, pulling it down by its roots. I slumped to the ground, holding my stomach as I knelt on the spot. I was in so much pain that I broke out in cold sweat. I put on a sanitary pad in advance, but the blood gushing out made me feel like my pants were about to be soaked. I was so embarrassed that I didn't know what to do. It was so painful that my brain felt numb. Chapter 3152. I'm sorry. I apologized in a panic, but I couldn't tell who I was apologizing to. To the pitiful and innocent little life in my stomach? Or to the bathroom? I wiped the floor in pain, but just as I wiped the floor clean, it got dirty again. I took a tissue to wipe it again. The more I moved, the worse the pain in my stomach became. I grabbed my clothes tightly, not daring to take off my pants or face the strange situation of my body. I wanted to call Hanxiao, but I was afraid that she would see me in such a sorry state. At that time, the entire world would spin, and all the scenery would become blurry and unfamiliar. I struggled to get up from the ground, but the pain made me kneel on the ground. My body curled up like a shrimp, shivering. I suddenly felt cold. My whole body was cold. Outside the door, Hanxiao suddenly knocked. Xiachuan, how are you? Are you done? My parents are coming back soon. I'm not done yet, I suddenly said with a sobbing tone. Hanxiao, I'm sorry. I think I dirtied the bathroom. I'll clean it. Clean it before opening the door. Hanxiao was stunned for a moment before she suddenly opened the door hurriedly. Did you bleed a lot? Xiachuan, open the door. Open the door first. But I didn't dare to open the door. I was afraid that if I opened the door and Hanxiao walked in, she would hate me too. After a while, Hanxiao stopped knocking on the door and left in a hurry. Then I vaguely heard the footsteps of two people outside the door, one in front and one behind. Xiao, where's your classmate? In the bathroom. Oh. I thought that her parents must be back, but I couldn't open the door at all. I hadn't tidied up the bathroom yet. I stood up with the help of the wall, only to see a pool of blood on the ground while I was unconscious. My lips trembled as I tried to get a clean tissue, but the more I panicked, the more I made a mess. I forced myself to lean against the wall. My vision turned black and I lost consciousness for a moment. When I opened my eyes again, I heard Hanxiao knocking on the door in a panic. Xiachuan, open the door. Xiao, why was your classmate in there for so long? Is she not feeling well? Dad, Mom, go back to your room. I'll take good care of her. I lost consciousness again. When she woke up again, she heard the sound of someone knocking on the door. Outside the door, Su Qi's anxious voice could be heard. He's been inside for so long and hasn't responded. Something must have happened. Why did you take so long to call me? I don't know either. Out of the way. I'll break the door open. I said hoarsely, don't hit me. Just as I reached out my hand, the door was kicked open by Su Qi with a loud bang. He rushed into the bathroom and lowered his head to see me leaning against the wall. I looked delirious. In my blurry vision, I could see his panicked expression. Xiachuan, what happened to you? When Hanxiao saw me in such a miserable state, she was also frightened. Her eyes immediately turned red. Hurry up and send me to the hospital. Send him to the hospital. What's going on? Su Qi questioned in a low voice. How did she end up like this? Su Qi, don't ask. Hurry up and send him to the hospital. Chapter 3153. I don't want to go to the hospital. Su Qi frowned and said angrily, what nonsense are you saying? Beside him, Hanxiao also urged, Su Qi, take her to the hospital first. Leave this to me. Su Chi nodded and carried me out the door. I felt as if blood was flowing out of my body, wetting his sleeves. I grabbed his lapels and said, "Su Chi, don't worry about me, okay?" Su Chi's face was tense and he didn't say anything. It took a lot of effort for him to maintain his composure and carry me downstairs. He drove here. Later, I found out that when I fainted, Han Xiao was worried that something had happened to me. In a daze, she called Su Chi. Su Chi received the call and rushed over. As it was already nighttime, he didn't have to worry about the traffic police checking, so he drove over. He carried me into the car, only to find that my white school pants were stained red with blood. I sat in the front passenger seat, looking a little helpless. Don't dirty your car, Yin Xiaochuan." Su Chi gripped my shoulder tightly. He couldn't take it anymore. I looked into his bloodshot eyes, as if he was enduring something. I heard him say word by word, "I'm begging you, okay? When you're better, I'll listen to whatever you say. But now, let me make sure that you're safe and sound. Otherwise, I won't forgive you, and I won't forgive myself." My lips trembled violently and I burst into tears. Seeing that I was crying, Su Chi's tone softened. "I'll take you to the hospital first." Then he fastened my seatbelt, closed the door, and got into the driver's seat. With trembling hands, he turned the key lock and started the car. Along the way, I clutched my abdomen, my face contorted in pain. In the end, I couldn't take the pain anymore and cried softly. When he heard me cry, he pursed his lips. His eyes were red and tears flowed silently. After running many red lights along the way, he brought me to the hospital. He didn't have time to park the car in the parking lot, so he parked it by the side of the road. He carried me and ran into the hospital. Standing in the rushing crowd, he shouted, "Doctor? Save her, save her. She lost a lot of blood." I knew that he rarely came to the hospital by himself. He once patted his chest and told me that he had been very healthy since he was young. Even if he had a fever or a cold, he rarely came to the hospital. Therefore, he did not know whether he should register first or send him directly to the emergency room. I suddenly grabbed his arm tightly and begged, "Su Chi, no matter what happens, don't tell Yin Dongyu, okay?" After saying that, I was in so much pain that I couldn't speak anymore. I curled up in his arms, my consciousness alternating between sober and confused. The pain in my abdomen was getting more and more obvious. What happened after that, I lost consciousness. He only knew that when he woke up again, he was already in the ward. I opened my eyes. Su Chi, who had been watching over me all night, finally looked relieved when she saw that I was awake. "Xiaochun, you're awake." I looked to the side and saw a bag of blood hanging from it. Su Chi immediately took my hand. His palm was so warm, but I felt that it was burning and subconsciously retracted my hand. I said, What's wrong with me?" The doctor said. Chapter 3154. Oh. I pretended to be calm and pursed my lips. I didn't want to show too much helplessness in front of him, so I pretended to be relaxed and asked, "Then, did you lose the one in my stomach?" Su Chi's gaze became a little unfamiliar. He looked at me silently for a while before suddenly asking, "Xiaochuan, you're pregnant. Why didn't you tell me? When did this happen? And who's the child?" I asked casually, "Did you lose the child?" Su Chi saw that I was deliberately avoiding the topic and hesitated. Perhaps he was understanding that under such circumstances, he couldn't sit down and talk about it properly. He only said, "No, it's an ectopic pregnancy. I need surgery." His expression was so gloomy that I didn't know how to continue. Then, I pursed my lips, a little embarrassed, but I had to be thick-skinned and say, "Can you lend me some money? When I'm better, I'll go to work. No matter what, I'll definitely pay you back." Su Chi lost control and said, "Who wants you to pay me back? Do you need to borrow money from me?" "No, I have to pay you back." I said calmly, "I don't want to owe you anything." Su Chi was silent for a long time. He covered his eyes weakly and took 2 deep breaths before saying in a choked voice, "Xiaochuan, so, is this why you're avoiding me? Is that why you don't want to continue dating me? Do you think I'll despise you?" I silently tugged at the blanket and looked at the white sheets, unmoved. "Su Chi, don't worry about me. You don't owe me anything. There's no need to do so much for me. Xiachuan, don't torture me, okay? Su Qi stared at me, his eyes red. He suddenly looked away and lowered his head to hide his wet eyes. He didn't look at me anymore, probably because he felt that he was too much of a disappointment. He had always said that a man bleeds but not tears. In front of me, he had always been so bright and dazzling. He rarely lost control like he did now. I forced a smile. What's wrong? Su Qi, I'm really fine. Nothing serious. He looked at me and tears finally rolled down his cheeks. He leaned forward and held my hand. I really don't know what to do. All I know is that when I found out that you were pregnant and that you had a secret abortion, I hated myself very much. But you actually told me not to interfere. You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe you anything. At this point, he choked up and said helplessly, Yin Xiachuan, please don't torture me anymore, okay? No matter what happens, I will face it with you. Why are you running away from me? Do you really hate me so much? I held back my tears and forced a smile. Su Qi, thank you, but after what happened, it's hard for me to continue being your girlfriend as if nothing happened. If you really care about me, can you do me a favor? What is it? I don't want my family to know about this. I suddenly gripped the blanket tightly and said with difficulty, You know, if something like this happens, the family will be very angry. I need you to think of a way for me. Su Qi asked, Do you not want your family to know, or do you just not want Dongyu to know? Chapter 3155. Su Qi was silent for a long time before suddenly saying, Xiachuan, do you know? If I could start my life all over again, no matter who you like, even if you're using me, I'd be willing to be used to the end. If I could do it all over again, I definitely wouldn't let go of your hand. My heart skipped a beat. He said, Just now, Han Xiao called Dongyu and said that you're staying at her house. As for what happens after that, I'll think of a way to help you apply for leave from school. As for your family, I'll think of something else. It was actually a relatively simple matter to deal with the school. He found a few mature people to imitate my father's tone and lie that I was sick at home. He also asked Han Xiao to bring a leave request. As for my family, I've also thought of a way to deal with it. Before the surgery, I only needed to take some medicine orally during the few days I was hospitalized. After the nurses left, I changed my clothes and went home quietly. The next morning, I pretended to go out to school and then returned to the hospital. The nurses were less strict with me, so after the ward rounds in the afternoon, I changed my clothes and secretly took the car home. When I got home that afternoon, I opened the door and found that my mother had already cooked dinner. To my surprise, Lin Li was there too. She sat on the sofa while Dongyu started to clean up the dishes. Looking at the mess on the table, I guessed that they had already eaten dinner. Lin Li was chatting with my father. I stood at the door, a little stunned. Then I heard my mother walk over after clearing the table. She enthusiastically poured Lin Li a cup of tea and said with a smile, Lily, don't be so formal. Treat this as your own home. I'd thought that my family would be worried about me after I hadn't been home for a day. However, they acted as if I didn't exist. Lin Li took the teacup reservedly and took a sip. She smiled and said, Thank you, Auntie. My mother laughed. Why are you being so polite? As she spoke, she smiled at my father and said, Look, Lily is such a pretty girl. I heard that she has good grades and is one of the top students in class. In the future, she'll definitely get into a key university. That's right, my father echoed. My mother said half-jokingly, Lily, come to our house often in the future. It's rare for Dongyu to bring a girl home. Since you're good classmates, remember to visit often. Aya, if my future daughter-in-law can be like you, I will wake up laughing in my dreams. Dongyu frowned at the side. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the entrance and his gaze fell on me. He immediately stopped what he was doing. Lin Li laughed. Auntie, don't say that. I hugged my bag tightly and walked silently to my room. Perhaps it was because I made so little noise that everyone only noticed me when I appeared in the living room. My mother turned around and saw me. Her expression turned cold as she said sarcastically, Yo, you know to come back too? To think that you still know about this family. Wretched girl. When Dongyu saw me, he put down his work and walked over. He lowered his head and asked, "Where have you been these past few days?" I turned my face away from him and whispered, "I'm going back to my room." As she spoke, she avoided him and walked towards her room. He caught up with me and grabbed my arm. He frowned when he saw how pale my face was. "Why do you look so pale?" Chapter 3156. Dongyu, don't worry about her. Mother said angrily, "She has a home and doesn't want to go home. I don't know where she's fooling around. She's only in her teens and she's already so troublesome. I think she's grown up. The exams are coming up soon. Let's see what she's going to do. If she can't get into high school, she'll have to fend for herself." My expression turned even uglier when I heard this. Dongyu said unhappily, "Mom, cut it out. Xiaochuan is already so old and has her own opinions." Mother didn't say anything else. Dongyu took my arm into the study and closed the door. He looked down at my face and asked in a low voice, "Where have you been these past few days?" "I was at Han Zhao's house." "You're lying." Dongyu saw through my lie at a glance. "You can lie to anyone, but you can't lie to me. Look into my eyes and speak." I pushed him away forcefully and said angrily, Dongyu, that's enough. You're the one who distanced yourself from me. What's this about?" Dongyu's face was ashen as he said, "You're my sister. It's my responsibility to care about you." I let out a cold laugh and ignored him. I placed my bag on the table and suddenly rummaged through it to find his notebook. These were his homework notes from middle school. He'd given them to me to copy. I subconsciously rubbed my hand against my pants until I thought I'd wiped it clean and wouldn't dirty his things. Then I handed the notebook back to him. "Here, take it back." I didn't look at his face, but I heard his voice turn slightly cold. "Are you done copying?" "Yes." "Do you understand everything?" "Yes." Then, Dongyu saw my cold attitude and thought that it would be difficult for me to talk to him again. He took a deep breath and said, "Sleep early. Good night." It was only after he left the room that I opened the drawer and took out the diary. I flipped through the thick pages and wrote down today's diary. I'd kept the habit of keeping a diary since I was in the 4th grade of primary school. At that time, I liked to write down everything that was going well, unhappy, happy, and unhappy, as well as secrets related to Dongyu in my diary. To me, keeping a diary was like pouring out all my unspeakable secrets into a tree hole. The diary is like my tree hole. Every night before going to bed, I would hide in this tree hole and silently tell it about my worries. Because in this world, it seemed that only by talking to oneself could one unreservedly vent one's hidden thoughts. When would even Dongyu be unable to keep everything to himself? The growth of a person was like building a thick fortress for oneself and hiding oneself within it. It was as if the stronger the fortress, the safer one would feel. The older one grew, the more guarded one would be, and the harder it would be for one to get close to others. When he was young, no matter who his friends were, they could talk about anything. They were like happy little birds, unable to hide their thoughts. However, as he grew up, he realized that there were fewer and fewer people close to him. The secrets in his heart also increased, and the burden on his back became heavier. As he walked on, he was already staggering. In short, humans were creatures with strong instincts. When his fingers touched the fire, it would be so hot that he would subconsciously retract his hand. When one touched something sharp, one would be injured. Knowing the pain, one would also know to shrink back. Chapter 3157. Sometimes I felt like a hopelessly stubborn idiot. I gripped the blade so tightly that my hands were covered in blood, but I refused to let go. Opening the diary, I wrote with difficulty on this page, "Liking someone I shouldn't have is like sailing against the current with no end in sight. It's hard to advance or retreat. Liking you and love are the same thing. They're inseparable. If I give up, I'll give up everything. But if liking you only brings me pain, I'm willing to give up everything." I closed the diary and hugged it tightly in my arms. Tears fell unconsciously. The next morning, I carried my bag to school as if nothing had happened. In the past, Dongyu and I would go to school together, but early in the morning at the intersection, I parted ways with him. He walked in front, and while he wasn't looking, I took a taxi to the hospital. Su Qi gave me a few hundred yuan. When I took the money, my face burned. If I had the ability, I would never have taken the money. After taking a taxi to the hospital, I obediently went back to my ward and lay down. For the next 2 days, I would sneak home at night and sneak to the hospital in the morning. After school, Su Qi would come to the hospital to accompany me. Han Xiao would come too. After what had happened at her house that day, I saw that her face was red and swollen. There were signs of a beating, and I felt even more guilty. 2 days later, I had surgery. Su Qi paid for all my medical bills. Before entering the operating theater, Su Qi accompanied me to the outside. He held my hand tightly and said, "Don't be nervous. The doctor said it's a small surgery. I won't go anywhere. I'll wait for you here." I closed my eyes and allowed myself to be pushed into the operating theater. Outside the operating theater, there were a few surgical trailers parked. It gave me the illusion that this was not an operating theater, but a slaughterhouse. It might be a little unkind to say that, but I looked at the doctors squatting outside the door, leaning against the wall. Their sterile clothes were stained with blood, but they could still chat casually with smiles on their faces. Perhaps they had seen too much of life and death, so they took a surgery like mine lightly. After the anesthetic, I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was in the ward. I opened my eyes, only to see an empty ceiling. Su Qi? As soon as the anesthetic wore off, the pain came again and again. I forced myself to sit up. When I leaned against the headboard, I saw that the room was full of people. There was Dongyu, Daddy, Mommy, Su Qi, Han Xiao. I was frightened by the scene in front of me. I didn't know if I was dreaming or in reality. I didn't know why they would appear here. Su Qi stood at the side with a gloomy expression. Dongyu sat by the bed without a word. I opened my mouth in a daze and spat out a word with difficulty. Seeing that I had woken up, my mother's anger flared up again. In the next second, she rushed over, grabbed my hair, and slapped me twice. "Yin Xiachuan, are you trying to anger me to death? How did you get pregnant? You're still in junior high school. You're still in junior high school. You're so young, yet you don't know how to behave? Didn't I tell you before that girls should have self-respect and self-respect? Did you turn a deaf ear to my words?" Chapter 3158. My mother was obviously furious. She pointed at me, slapped and hit me, and said without thinking, "Why are you so cheap? How did I give birth to such a shameless daughter like you? Other people's daughters are very obedient. How did I end up with such a good-for-nothing like you? Are you trying to anger me and your father to death?" Dongyu walked over and pulled her back. "Mom, calm down. Xiachuan is still insensible. Don't blame her." "If I don't blame her, who else can I blame?" My mother pushed him away. "Get out of my way." With that, she grabbed my arm and dragged me off the bed. She grabbed my clothes angrily and hit me. "See how I'll teach you a lesson today. So what if I hit you? I don't have a daughter like you. I'll just beat you to death, once and for all." She slapped me, swearing and swearing. Su Qi immediately rushed forward to protect me, crying, "Auntie, Xiachuan has just had surgery. Don't hit her. Her body won't be able to take it. If you protect her, do you believe that I will beat you up too?" My mother shouted hysterically. "If I'd known that you were such a disappointment and made me lose so much face, I would have ruthlessly aborted you when I was pregnant with you. I shouldn't have kept you. If only I had aborted you. I don't have a daughter like you. I don't have a daughter like you." When I heard this, my body trembled violently. I knelt on the ground in front of her with a numb face. "Mom, I know I was wrong. So, hit me hard, okay? I won't complain even if you beat me to death. But, don't scold me, okay? I would also feel humiliated. I would also feel ashamed. I would rather she hit me hard than say such cruel words." When Dongyu heard this, he seemed to break down. He rushed up to her and pushed her away, shouting at her, "Mom, shut up. It's time to stop." He turned to look at me, his eyes filled with heartache. He clenched his fists and said, "She's my sister and your daughter. Don't you think it's too cruel of you to say that?" "You?" His mother looked at him in shock. She probably found it hard to imagine that Dongyu, who had always been obedient, would refute her like this. Dad stood by the side and sighed. He questioned me, "Then tell me, who is the father of the child? Who did this to you?" I didn't speak. Dongyu looked at me nervously. Suddenly, he knelt beside me and pulled me into his arms. He said to his father, "Dad, don't force her. If she doesn't want to talk about it, then don't ask anymore. Such a big thing has happened, can I even ask about it?" Her father said angrily, "If she doesn't tell us who that boy is, she'll never step into this house." Su Qi suddenly stood up. "It's me." His mother looked at him in shock. "It's you?" Dongyu suddenly raised his head and glared at him angrily. His eyes were bloodshot and scarlet. "Su Qi, is it really you?" "It's me." Su Qi nodded and gritted his teeth. "So, I will take responsibility." Dongyu suddenly stood up and punched him in the face. "Su Qi, you bastard!" I had never seen Dongyu so furious. It was as if he had transformed into a ferocious beast. He pinned Su Qi to the bed and punched him in the face. The scene was chaotic. Chapter 3159. The scene was chaotic. Even I was shocked and couldn't react for a long time. My father immediately stepped forward to stop him. Su Qi pushed Dongyu away and said angrily, Dongyu, calm down." However, Dongyu grabbed him by the collar with both hands and glared at him. He roared, I warned you, I warned you." I covered my ears and screamed, "Stop hitting him." Everyone was stunned and turned to look at me. My body swayed as I said weakly, "It's not him." "What?" Dongyu was stunned as well. Su Qi frowned slightly. Before he could stop me, I said again, "It's not him, it's really not him. So, stop hitting him, stop hitting him." Han Xiao couldn't stand it anymore. She came over and hugged me, pleading, "Uncle, Auntie, I know I have no right to speak. This is your family matter, but Xiaochuan knows she's in the wrong." "But what does she know? How much care have you guys shown her? She doesn't know anything. When she makes a mistake, you only know how to hit her and scold her. But who really cares about her?" Han Xiao started crying. If one has to pay the price for doing something wrong, Xiaochuan has already paid the price. Isn't that enough? Isn't that a heavy enough price? Are you heartbroken for her, or are you heartbroken for your own reputation? I bit my lip hard to stop my tears from falling. In the past, whenever I made a mistake, my mother would question me angrily whenever I cried. How could I have the cheek to cry after doing something wrong? I didn't have the face to cry, so I tried my best not to. I didn't want to make them angry anymore. Not at all. I had no idea how the farce ended. I only knew that my parents insisted on returning the medical fees to Su Qi and then went back. They left Dongyu and Su Qi to take care of me. At that time, I didn't know how Dongyu felt when he stood guard by my bedside, or how he looked at me with those eyes. All I knew was that he was lying next to me, hugging me tightly even in his sleep. It was as if he wanted to give me the greatest sense of security he could possibly give me. I looked at his face. His eyes were closed and he looked calm. However, his brows were slightly furrowed. Even in his sleep, it was hard to calm down. I also wanted to hug him tightly, but every time I raised my hand in the air, I would retract it resentfully. She couldn't hug him. If he didn't approach her, he wouldn't have any thoughts about her. If you don't touch it, your heart won't be affected. We could no longer be like when we were young. When we were in our hometown, I would hug him, pinch his nose from time to time, ravage his hair, and then lean on him to listen to his stories. But now, we can't do that anymore. After I was discharged from the hospital, my father applied to the school, saying that I was unwell and went through the procedures to suspend my studies. So I rested at home, shut myself in my room, and ate very little. Occasionally, I would read a book or write a diary. Every time Dongyu returned home from school, he would come to my room and sit by my side, accompanying me silently. He didn't speak much, and I rarely spoke to him. I would just hold the drawing board and draw casually on it. Sometimes, he would come over and put his arm around my shoulder, saying something to me, but I didn't seem to hear him. Chapter 3160. I sealed myself in a very narrow spiral shell, hiding and refusing to go out. Sometimes, Su Qi wanted to look for me, but my parents repeatedly forbade us from seeing each other. He would call the landline at home. I didn't have a phone in my room. When my mother received his call, she would scold him and hang up. However, he still persevered and called every 2 or 3 days. As for me, it was as if I had lost my mind. I held the diary and wrote. As I wrote, tears fell. I wiped them clean and continued to draw. I asked him in the diary, "Dongyu, have you ever liked me, even just a little? How great would it be if we weren't siblings? If you weren't In Dongyu, or if my name wasn't In Xiachuan, then when we met as usual, the impossible would become possible. However, if you weren't In Dongyu and I wasn't In Xiachuan, would our lives have intersected? Was it really a shameful thing to fall in love with someone you shouldn't?" I knew that I wouldn't get a response, but I still poured out the questions in my heart in the diary. The days passed in a daze. Until one day, I heard some unusual movements outside the house. "Dongyu? What's wrong with you?" "Hubby, come quickly. Dongyu is covered in injuries." When I heard this, I nervously opened the door and walked out. I saw Dongyu kneeling on the ground in the living room, covered in injuries. His face was covered in bruises, and the blood clot at the corner of his eye was especially heavy. It looked like someone had punched him hard. When I saw this, I pounced on him like a madman and asked in a panic, "Brother, what's wrong with you?" Dongyu raised his eyes to look at me, but the corners of his lips curved into a gentle smile. "That person's name is Fang Liang, isn't it?" I was stunned as if I had been struck by lightning. He put his arm around my shoulders and pulled me into his embrace. He gently stroked my back and forced a smile. He gently coaxed me, "Don't be afraid, okay? I've already taught that person a lesson for you." As he spoke, his voice choked with sobs and he hugged me even tighter. "Don't be afraid. Even if it's hell, I'll be with you." I saw tears fall from his eyes, and my heart ached so much that it was suffocating. What the hell happened? Her mother and father were pacing around anxiously. Outside the door, Su Qi chased after him. He was also covered in injuries. His school uniform had been torn a few times, and there were obvious signs of being hit on his face. He walked up to Dongyu, panting slightly. He glanced at me again, clenched his fists, and silently released them. I immediately realized what had happened. I slumped to the ground, my heart clenching. It all started when Su Qi and Dongyu bumped into a group of young men on their way home. One of them was Fang Liang. Fang Liang told Su Qi that he was going to the bar to have fun, but his car had been detained by his family, so he had asked Su Qi to borrow his car. Su Qi said that the keys were at home, so Fang Liang said that he wanted to go back to get them. On the way, Su Qi unintentionally mentioned my name. As I was grounded and could hardly leave the house, he could only get news of me from Dongyu. When Fang Liang heard my name, he found it familiar. After asking, he suddenly smiled contemptuously and said, "Oh, so it's her." Chapter 3161. Have you forgotten? That day, we went to the KTV to sing. Your little girlfriend was there too. But didn't you guys break up? Su Qi was vague. Fang Liang suddenly smiled ambiguously and said casually, "Su Qi, you can't do it. Isn't it a pity to break up after dating for so long without having sex? However, as your brother, I'll do it for you." As soon as he said that, before Su Qi could react, Dongyu grabbed him by the collar with an ashen face and punched him hard in the face with a devastating fury. A few young men who were with Fang Liang came over to hit him when they saw this. Su Qi reacted and the group got into a scuffle. However, Su Qi and Dongyu had always been clear about their grudges. They were covered in injuries, but Fang Liang was seriously injured. He had broken ribs, broken fingers, multiple soft tissue injuries, and a moderate concussion. Dongyu hugged me and kept mumbling, "Why did you hide it from me? How could you hide it from me?" I hugged his waist helplessly, tears streaming down my face. Not long after, the police arrived and brought Su Qi and Dongyu back to the police station for investigation. I took a taxi with my parents and rushed to the police station. Only then did I find out that Fang Liang had been seriously injured. As it involved serious injuries, this was no longer a simple fight between students. Any minor injuries would constitute a criminal case. Soon, Fang Liang's relatives arrived. They were a man and a woman. The man claimed to be Fang Liang's brother, and the woman was Fang Liang's mother. The two of them were arrogant and showed off in front of the police station, saying that they would severely punish the two criminals, Su Qi and Dong Yu. Beating someone up at such a young age? Fang Liang's mother was dressed elegantly. It was said that the Fang family was considered a prestigious family in the capital. They came from the guest house and had a powerful background. I later found out about the rumors about Su Qi. Someone saw Su Qi accompanying a girl to the hospital for an abortion. I asked Su Qi about it, and he said that the girl was pregnant, but it wasn't his. He refused to say who had gotten her pregnant, saying that it was a secret. Only then did I know that this person was Fang Liang. Perhaps it was because of their family background and their father's background that no one dared to offend the Fang family. Fang Liang was the only child in the family, so he was spoiled since he was young. When he was in junior high school, he hung out with the youths in society. When he was in high school, he drove luxury cars to nightclubs and bars. His father wanted to arrange a good future for him. Through his connections, he arranged for him to go to a famous university. However, he was not in the mood to study at all. After 2 years, he quit school and stayed at home. Now that Fang Liang was seriously injured and in the hospital, the Fang family must be furious. Therefore, when they were at the police station, they were so arrogant that they were cursing. "Who are the two students who beat up my brother? Stand out. I'm going to break their legs today." On the surface, the police pretended to sternly stop them, but they didn't do anything substantial to stop them. It seemed that they were more or less afraid of the Fang family's power. On several occasions, when Fang Liang's brother found out that we were Dong Yu's family, he pretended to rush up to us. If the police hadn't stopped him, he would have swung his fist at us. His mother was so scared that she was trembling and out of her wits. Chapter 3162. While I was on tenterhooks, I heard Fang Liang's mother say angrily outside the door, "My son has always been very precious. Since he was young, no one dared to touch him. Now he's lying in the intensive care unit, his life and death unknown. Sentence them, we must sentence them. They're so ruthless at such a young age. Won't they become murderers when they grow up? These two students are destined to be the scum of society. It's not too much to sentence them to death. If the law can't sentence them, my Fang family is not to be trifled with. Just wait and see." After I heard that, I struggled for a long time in my heart. Suddenly, I didn't know where the courage came from. Suddenly, I stood up and walked out of the door until I stopped in front of the woman. When she saw me, she frowned. I spoke before she could say anything. "Auntie Fang, I suggest that you come forward and reconcile with our family." "Oh, you're the sister of the student who hit someone, right? What an arrogant tone. Get lost." On the side, the man said, "Suing those two students for intentional injury, they should be adults, right? The sentence won't be light." After I heard that, I clenched my fists and pretended to be calm. "If you dare to sue my brother for intentional injury, then I'll sue Fang Liang for rape of an underage girl." My parents chased after me. When they saw this scene, they were stunned on the spot. My mother quickly came up to pull me. I shook off her hand and stared at Fang Liang's mother without blinking. Rape of an underage girl? I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and said word by word, "I just had an abortion a few days ago. Fang Liang took me to a hotel while I was drunk. You don't know about this, right? Fang Liang should be 20 years old, right? Since he's already an adult, then the crime of raping an underage girl is much more serious than intentional injury, right? If you insist on making a big deal out of this, I don't mind accompanying you to the end." Fang Liang's mother said angrily, "Based on your words, what evidence do you have to say that my son raped you?" "It's rape, Annie." I endured the unprecedented humiliation and pretended to be calm, but I said each word with tears of blood. "If you don't believe me, I think the hotel has a record of the room. Also, if an investigation is filed, I'll cooperate in all aspects. No matter how you want to collect evidence, I'll accept it." Well, I know that the Fang clan is quite powerful. Commoners like us can't compete with you. After a pause, I said with a sobbing tone, "But if I expose it to the media, I'll be in trouble." Do you have the ability to suppress it? You? Fang Liang's mother took a few steps towards me. She gritted her teeth and said, "Do you think a little liar like you can threaten me? Or are you overestimating yourself and want to fight?" You say, then we'll see. I Fang Fang's mother says. She acted domineering, but my attitude was equally domineering. She stared at me blankly for a long while. Perhaps it was because my gaze was firm and determined enough to threaten her. She suddenly gritted her teeth and nodded. Okay. With that, she led the man away. Chapter 3163. After Dongyu finished giving his statement, he was taken home. After 2 days of trepidation, the police station called and said that the Fang family had agreed to a settlement. You guys are so lucky. After offending the Fang family, you actually have the ability to get those people to settle the matter peacefully. When I found out that Dongyu and Su Qi were fine and only slightly injured, the Fang family didn't pursue the matter. They were probably afraid that I would blow the matter up. I really don't know how much courage I had to muster to stand in front of them and fight them head-on. All I know is that at that time, in order to protect Dongyu, I was willing to risk my life. However, it was a fact that Dongyu had gotten into a fight. When the school found out about this, they had initially decided to expel him from school. Dongyu was in his 3rd year of high school. With his excellent results, he would definitely be able to get into a key university overseas. Mom and Dad had worked hard to save money, hoping that he would be able to get into Stanford University. However, such a bolt out of the blue had stunned them. At that time, university admissions were very strict about student records. If it was a B-grade student, most of them wouldn't be accepted. Many well-known universities only had a few spots. Even if they passed the cutoff, they would still be admitted based on merit. The student's character was also taken into consideration, and the consequences of disciplinary action were severe. Dad was furious. He used his connections from various parties and finally managed to talk to the principal of a high school. He repeatedly promised that there wouldn't be any disciplinary violations for the next half of the semester. Hence, the teacher put him on probation. If Dongyu performed well during the college entrance examination, he would be removed. However, my situation was a little bad. There was news from the school that I should transfer schools. I had fallen behind in my homework. In addition, I had skipped classes and stayed out all night. The school had the intention of dissuading me. Mom had been conflicted about my transfer. Until one day, when I returned to the study after taking a shower, I saw my mother sitting in my study with my diary in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on it, and her entire body was trembling with anger. My heart skipped a beat. I rushed forward and snatched the diary back, hugging it tightly in my arms. "Mom, the diary is my ***. How could you peek at it?" ***. Peek? Mom stood up, her gaze cold. "It's all thanks to you that I peeked. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what dirty thoughts you had about Dongyu." Dirty, this word had completely defeated me. I gripped the edge of the diary tightly as tears burst out of my eyes. "Xiaochuan, do you still know what shame is? Who is Dongyu to you? He's your brother. How could you have such thoughts about him? Don't you know how to blush? Don't you feel ashamed?" Halfway through her sentence, she angrily wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and cried out of anger. Seeing this, I stood to the side in shame. I wanted to explain, but I couldn't say anything. "Do you know what you're doing is indecent?" I almost screamed, "I know." She was stunned. Then, there was an eerie silence between us. I didn't dare to look at her, but stood awkwardly against the wall, pressing my lips together and crying. Mom suddenly stood up and pretended to be calm as she said to me, "It just so happens that your aunt and I discussed sending you abroad to study a few days ago. I think you've lost your mind, so it's time to send you abroad. Wake up your head." Chapter 3164. I was stunned when I heard this. She brushed past me and walked out of the door. I hurriedly grabbed her hand, but she shook it off mercilessly. She walked to the sofa and sat down. She picked up the receiver and was about to dial. I threw down the diary and ran over. I knelt in front of her and begged, "Mom, don't send me abroad. I don't want to go abroad. I don't want to go abroad." She looked at me with a struggle in her eyes, but more than that, she was heartbroken. Suddenly, she put down the receiver and questioned me hysterically, "How long are you going to continue harming Dongyu?" I looked at her in shock. I didn't know that to Dongyu, I was actually a scourge. She continued to shout at me, "Because of you, he almost couldn't go to university and was almost sued. Dongyu has been very obedient since he was young. He dotes on you, but there's no reason for his life to be ruined by you." After a pause, she broke down and shouted, "If word gets out that his own sister likes him, what will outsiders think of him? Laugh at him? Do you really want to be a disgrace to him?" Disgrace? I'm not a disgrace. I'm not a disgrace. I lost my mind and only wanted to stay at home. I begged bitterly, but my mother ignored me and chased me aside. She called my aunt. "Hello, big sister, it's me. About the matter I discussed with you last time. I've thought about it. If we send Xiaochuan to America to study, do we need to go through any procedures?" I've already thought about it. I'm not reluctant to send her abroad so that she can see the world. Alright, tell me, I'll remember. My mother took a pen and paper as she took notes. Passport. What else? When Dongyu and Dad returned home, I was curled up in the living room, hugging my knees and crying. Mom was sitting on the sofa, her face twisted as she wiped her tears with a tissue. Dad was a little surprised. He looked at us and asked, "What's going on?" "I've already discussed it with Big Sister. When we return to the country, we'll send Xiaochuan over and she'll study in America with her." After a pause, Mom added, "I've already made a decision on this matter." "Are you really going to send her abroad?" His father was a little surprised. He probably had the same idea before, but if he really wanted to send him abroad, he would feel a little reluctant and abrupt. "Why did you suddenly make such a decision?" Dongyu, on the other hand, was stunned. He looked at me and then at his mother, his face full of shock. "Mom," Dongyu asked, "why did you send my sister overseas?" "I've already decided, so don't ask any more." "No," Dongyu said firmly, "you can't send my sister abroad." However, his mother was persistent. "Dongyu, I really can't let her hold you back anymore. You don't know She pointed at me but didn't say anything. Dongyu looked at me and then at the diary that had fallen not far away. He suddenly understood something. He dropped his arm weakly and clenched it tightly again. Then he said word by word, "Mom, please don't send my sister away. She is an inseparable part of my life. Don't you think it's too cruel to say that?" Chapter 3165. I really shouldn't have wanted her back then. I shouldn't have given birth to her. We can't afford to have such an insensible daughter. "Mom, please don't send me away," I begged Dongyu in a hoarse voice. "Brother, I don't want to study abroad." I begged Mom, but she won't listen to me. "Brother, does Dad not want me anymore? Does Mom not want me anymore?" It's useless to say anything. I've already made an agreement with your aunt. When she returns to the country, I'll send you away. As she spoke, she stood up and walked towards the room. Dongyu suddenly knelt heavily on the ground. Finally, he broke down and cried bitterly. "Want her. Even if you don't want her. Want her. If the whole world doesn't want her, I want her. If you send my sister away, I swear, I'll be irreconcilable with you. Bastard. You shut up." His father slapped him in the face, pointed at him and scolded, "Take back your words." "Want her." Dongyu was unbelievably stubborn. "You can't send her away." Slap. Another slap. I cried and hugged Dad's trouser leg. "Dad, stop hitting me. Stop hitting brother." Dad didn't even look at me. He glared at Dongyu with bloodshot eyes. The father and son confronted each other for a long time. Dongyu looked up and said, "I want her." Slap. "Want her." Slap. I didn't know how many times Dad slapped him that day. Perhaps it was to establish his authority as the head of the family, or perhaps it was because he felt that Dongyu was too stubborn and wanted to tame him. But Dongyu was more stubborn than I had imagined. Even though his face was flushed with blood, he still repeated, "I want her. I want her. I want her." That night, Dongyu was locked on the balcony while I was locked in the room. I leaned against the window and watched Dongyu's upright figure kneeling on the balcony. His back was facing me as he faced the balcony. The cold wind outside the window was getting stronger, but I couldn't go out. I couldn't go to his side and kneel with him in the cold wind. During those few days, I was locked in my room. My mother prepared 3 meals a day and brought them to me. Other than that, the door was locked from the inside. I had no access to the outside world at all. I was quarantined like a severely mentally ill person. Until one night, the door was suddenly unlocked from the inside. Startled, I sat up in bed defensively. I thought it was my mother who had opened the door and was about to send me away overnight. However, it was Dongyu who walked in. He had a small bag slung over his shoulder. When he saw me, he put his finger to his lips and shushed me. "They're all asleep." He walked in and closed the door slightly. Then he walked to my bedside and whispered, "I stole the key and some money. I'll take you away, okay?" "You're taking me away?" I was stunned and stared at him for a long time. I couldn't believe that such words had come out of Dongyu's mouth, who had always followed the rules. "Where are we going?" "Anywhere is fine." Dongyu held my hand tightly and smiled encouragingly. "Xiachuan, leave this place with me. They don't want you, but I want you. I don't want to study anymore. I'll go out to work and support you, okay?" I was stunned and tears welled up in my eyes. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Chapter 3166. Dongyu said seriously, "I'm very smart and I learn everything quickly. It doesn't mean that I'll be useless if I don't study. I'll take you to another city and we'll rent a house. Then I'll work hard and take good care of you, okay? Don't joke around." I turned around. "If I really go with you, Dad and Mom will hate me to the core." Dongyu suddenly hugged me and said sadly, "Then what do you want me to do?" He held my face and stared at it seriously. With a bitter smile, he said, "Don't tell me you're really going to let Mom send you overseas to study? Xiachuan, I'll go crazy if that happens. I can't lose you." I was encouraged by him at once, and he and I simply packed up and left the house. It was very windy at night. He draped his coat over me and hugged me tightly. "We'll be in the car soon," he said. In the wee hours of the morning, it was difficult to get a taxi. When they finally got one, Dongyu said to the driver, "Go to the bus station." I suddenly thought of something and said dejectedly, "If you take me away, what about Lin Li?" Dongyu was stunned for a moment. I didn't know what he was thinking, but his lips started to tremble violently. "If you can't bear to part with her, you don't have to leave," I smiled reluctantly. "It's okay. Going overseas isn't a life and death parting. I can still come back after I graduate." "I'm sorry." Dongyu clenched his fists tightly, but he couldn't say another word for a long time. Later on, through Su Qi, I guessed that Lin Li and he weren't really in a relationship. Lin Li did admire him, but the reason he agreed to date her was just to put on an act for me to see, so that I would give up on him completely. At that time, Dongyu probably felt that dating Lin Li was the worst decision of his life. If Lin Li hadn't provoked me to a certain extent, perhaps I wouldn't have taken such an extreme path. He must have regretted it. He must have felt that he was the real culprit for all the injuries I'd suffered. When he arrived at the bus station, he walked to the ticket counter. Suddenly, he thought of something and rummaged through his bag. His expression froze. I was shocked and asked cautiously, "What's wrong, brother?" "ID." Dongyu narrowed his eyes and tried to recall. "I think I left it at the entrance." I was stunned. "Is it a big deal if I don't bring my ID?" Dongyu gave me a conflicted look and then glanced at the ticket information. He suddenly turned to me and said, "Wait for me at the station for 30 minutes. I'll go back and get my ID." I was a little sensitive. "You're not regretting it, are you? Will you come back?" "No, I promise you I will definitely come back." Since he didn't have a cell phone, he arranged for me to sit in one of the seats. "Sit here and don't move around. I'm afraid that I won't be able to find you." "Yes." He left in a hurry. I suddenly stood up and stared at his back as he left. Subconsciously, I kept reminding myself that this seemed to be the last view he would leave for me. Reality had proven that sometimes, a person's sixth sense was extremely accurate. That night, I waited for him for 3 whole hours, But the person who came was someone I never expected. Yin Xiaochuan. Chapter 3167. Just take it that I'm begging you, she said in a sobbing tone. Dongyu is Dad and Mom's only hope. He can't be destroyed by your whims, do you understand? Just take it that I'm begging you to study abroad obediently, okay? It was as if my soul had been sucked out. I gave up struggling and nodded. That night, my mother didn't take me home. Instead, she took me on a train to Shanghai. When my aunt arrived in Shanghai the next day, my mother couldn't wait to send me off. She didn't even give me a chance to say goodbye to Dongyu. I still remember that when the train started to move slowly, I seemed to hear someone calling out to me. A child in the next seat pointed out the window and said in surprise, "Daddy, someone's chasing the train." I couldn't help but follow the child's gaze and look out of the car. What I saw was a desolate scene. More or less, my heart had already withered at that moment. My days studying abroad were peaceful, so peaceful that it was as if I was dead. It sounded a little dispirited to put it that way. But in fact, no matter what I did, I was no longer surprised. Even for the exams that students feared the most, I could always calmly face the blonde examiners and answer their questions smoothly. It wasn't that I didn't miss him. More than once, I missed those days when I was young and innocent. In the beautiful countryside of my hometown, Dongyu and I played carefree, rolling in the grass and scratching each other. In the afternoons, we carried bottles to the river to fish for tadpoles. We climbed trees to catch cicadas. We even secretly set a wildfire behind the adults' backs and accidentally burned down the neighbor's straw shed. The two of us fled in panic and didn't dare to go home for a long time. Go home. I really wanted to go home. I'd always thought that if only I hadn't been born in this world in Xiaochuan's name. But that was home, and yet it wasn't home. Every time the memories flooded my mind, my heart ached. I didn't want to think about it, but what else did I have left besides these memories? More than parting, missing someone was like a flood or a ferocious beast, swallowing me up and accompanying me. Until I returned home, I didn't feel much joy. To me, homeland is just a synonym. As I sat in the taxi and drove through those unfamiliar streets, I suddenly realized that I had missed more than 8 years in the past 8 years. After getting out of the taxi, I followed my mother into a brand new, high-end apartment building. I thought that since the old building had been demolished, they must have given a lot of subsidies. In the elevator, my mom smiled and explained, "We live on the 14th floor now. When the demolition happened, it was our turn to draw numbers. The community director said that if we paid 10,000 yuan, we could choose our own floor. We specially chose this floor. It has good lighting and a view room. All 3 rooms face south. We specially reserved a big room with a balcony for you." I didn't say anything and just looked around in silence. Her mother continued, "The property in this neighborhood is very good. It's usually very quiet." When she reached the door, she had just taken out her keys when she suddenly remembered something. She turned around and asked me tentatively, "Xiaochuan, it's been more than a year since you graduated from school, right?" I nodded silently.